Morning light crept through the thin curtains of the small house on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, casting pale golden streaks across the worn hardwood floor. Dust particles drifted lazily in the beams, suspended like tiny galaxies in the stillness of dawn. Marcus Callahan opened his eyes slowly, his body protesting against the stiff cushions of the old sofa where he had spent another restless night. Every joint ached, every muscle complained. 58 years of living had accumulated in his bones like sediment at the bottom of a river, and nights like this one only reminded him of how much the current had worn him down. Then he heard it, a sound that did not belong in his house. The soft clink of metal against ceramic, the whisper of bare feet on tile. Someone was in his kitchen. Marcus sat up in one fluid motion, his body responding before his mind could catch up. 20 years in the United States Navy had trained him to wake at the slightest anomaly, to assess threats before consciousness fully arrived. His hand instinctively reached for the side table where he kept nothing more dangerous than a flashlight these days, but old habits died harder than old soldiers. He turned his head toward the kitchen doorway, and his heart stopped mid-beat. A woman stood at his counter. Her dark hair was slightly disheveled, catching the early light in a way that made each strand seem touched by gold. She wore a white dress shirt, his white dress shirt, the one he had tossed over the back of the kitchen chair the night before. The sleeves were rolled up past her wrists, the hem falling to mid-thigh, and she moved through his space with a calm that suggested she had lived in this kitchen her entire life. She was making coffee, in his kitchen, wearing his shirt. The woman turned and a thin smile flickered at the corner of her lips. Her eyes were sharp, assessing the kind of eyes that had seen boardrooms and battlefields of their own making. She held his gaze without flinching. "You really don't remember anything from last night." Marcus swallowed hard. His voice came out hoarse, rougher than he intended. "Who the hell are you?" The woman set the coffee cup down on the counter with deliberate slowness, as if savoring every second of tension that hung in the air between them. She tilted her head, studying him the way a scientist might study a particularly interesting specimen. "The woman whose life you saved." Her voice was smooth, controlled, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "And the owner of the company that currently holds the mortgage on this house." Marcus was on his feet before he realized he had moved. The room tilted slightly, the events of the previous night rushing back in fragments, rain, fire, blood, a desperate voice crying for help. His pulse hammered against his temples, each beat a small explosion behind his eyes. From the hallway came the sound of a door creaking open, followed by a burst of giggles that cut through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Emma appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair tangled from sleep, her blue eyes wide with curiosity. At 12 years old, she had learned to read rooms the way other children learn to read books, and she was reading this one with intense interest. The woman's gaze shifted to Emma, then back to Marcus. Something changed in her expression, something unfamiliar and dangerous, as if she were carrying a secret that could reshape the entire landscape of his life. "We need to talk, Marcus." The storm had begun 24 hours earlier, though Marcus had not known then that it would change everything. He had been driving home from a job site on the east side of Portland, his ancient Ford pickup groaning beneath him like a wounded animal. 12 hours of work had left him drained, rewiring an old Victorian house, the kind of job that required crawling through spaces too small for a man his size, reaching into walls that crumbled at the touch, wrestling with decades of neglected infrastructure. His flannel shirt was soaked with sweat and motor oil. His hands, calloused from years of labor, trembled slightly from exhaustion. The rain had started around 6 in the evening, gentle at first, then building into something biblical. By the time Marcus reached the highway, water was sheeting across his windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Thunder rolled across the sky like artillery fire, and for a moment he was back in the engine room of the USS Constellation, feeling the ship shudder beneath him as waves crashed against the hull. 20 years in the Navy. 20 years of service as a mechanical engineer, keeping the machinery of war running smoothly, ensuring that the men and women who depended on those systems could trust them with their lives. He had served on 3 different carriers, survived 2 combat deployments, earned commendations that now gathered dust in a box somewhere in his closet. And when Sarah got sick, he had walked away from all of it without a second thought. Some things mattered more than medals. The pickup swayed on the flooded road, hydroplaning for a heart-stopping second before the tires found purchase again. Marcus gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched. He needed to get home. Emma was waiting, probably doing her homework at the kitchen table, probably worried about him driving in this weather. She worried too much for a 12-year-old, carried burdens too heavy for her young shoulders. That was his fault, he knew. Children learned fear from their parents, and he had taught her plenty. The headlights cut through the rain in weak yellow cones, illuminating only a few feet of road ahead. Marcus leaned forward, squinting through the deluge, when something at the edge of his vision made him slam on the brakes. A car. A luxury sedan, black and sleek, lay tilted against a massive oak tree on the roadside. The front end was crumpled like aluminum foil steam or smoke, he could not tell which, rising from the shattered hood. The headlights flickered weakly, casting irregular beams into the rain like the dying pulse of a heart. Marcus did not hesitate. He yanked the pickup to the shoulder, threw open the door, and launched himself into the storm. The rain hit him like a wall of ice. Within seconds, he was soaked through his boots, splashing through ankle-deep water as he ran toward the wreck. The smell hit him next, gasoline sharp and acrid, mixing with the copper scent of blood and the burnt rubber stench of deployed airbags. He reached the driver's side and pressed his face against the cracked window. A woman was inside, pinned behind the steering wheel. Her black suit was soaked through her white blouse, stained with blood from a gash on her forehead. An expensive watch gleamed on her wrist, catching the lightning that split the sky overhead. She was conscious, barely, her eyes wide with terror as she saw him. "Help me. Please. Help me." The words came out, broken, desperate, in the voice of someone who had never begged for anything in her life and did not know how to do it now. Marcus grabbed the door handle and pulled. Locked. He slammed his palm against the window, trying to get her attention. "I'm going to get you out. Stay calm. Can you unlock the door?" She fumbled for the controls, her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Blood was streaming down her face, pooling in the hollow of her collarbone. The lock clicked, but the door would not budge. The frame had warped in the impact, metal twisted against metal. Marcus stepped back and drove his elbow into the window. Pain exploded up his arm as the glass shattered shards, slicing through his sleeve and into his skin. He barely felt it. Adrenaline had taken over that old familiar companion from his Navy days, sharpening his senses and dulling everything else. He reached through the broken window, his hands finding the seatbelt release. Stuck. Of course it was stuck. He pulled his pocket knife from his jeans and cut through the nylon strap in one clean motion, then grabbed the woman under her arms and hauled her through the window. She collapsed against his chest, her body trembling violently, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I can't breathe." Marcus half-carried, half-dragged her away from the car, his boots sliding in the mud, rain hammering down on them both. They had made it maybe 30 feet when the engine compartment erupted in flames. The heat hit him like a physical blow, searing and immediate. He threw himself over the woman, shielding her with his body as the fire consumed what was left of the sedan. When he looked up, the car was a funeral pyre, orange and yellow flames dancing against the black sky, hissing and spitting as the rain tried futilely to extinguish them. The woman was shaking uncontrollably, her fingers clutching his shirt with desperate strength. Thank you. Oh God, thank you." Marcus helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. She was lighter than he expected, fragile beneath the expensive fabric of her suit. The nearest hospital was miles away, and half the city was flooded. There was no way he could get her there in time, not with the roads in this condition. "My house is close. We need to get you warm. Get that bleeding stopped." She nodded weakly, her eyes unfocused, shock setting in. He guided her to the pickup, lifted her into the passenger seat, and ran around to the driver's side. The engine coughed to life, and he pulled back onto the road, driving as fast as he dared through the storm. His house appeared through the rain like a ghost, a small wooden structure with peeling paint and a crooked fence hunched against the wind as if trying to make itself invisible. It was not much, but it was home. It was all he had left. Inside, he laid the woman on the only bed in the house, his bed, the one he had shared with Sarah for 15 years, the one where she had taken her last breath. He pushed that thought away, focusing on the immediate task. He cleaned the wound on her forehead, applied pressure to stop the bleeding, covered her with every blanket he could find. She was unconscious by then, her breathing shallow but steady. Marcus stood in the doorway watching her sleep. In the dim light, with the blood cleaned away and her face relaxed, she looked almost peaceful, almost ordinary. But something about her did not fit the tailored suit the designer watched the manicured nails. This was not a woman who belonged on a back road in rural Oregon during a thunderstorm. This was not a woman who belonged in his world at all. He grabbed a pillow and headed for the sofa. That would be his bed tonight. Around midnight, Emma appeared in the living room. She moved silently the way she always did when she sensed something was wrong, her bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. She looked at her father, then at the closed bedroom door. Her young face creased with concern. "Dad, who is that?" Marcus pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her thin shoulders. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and sleeped the scent of innocence in a world that had shown him too much of its darker side. "She was in an accident, sweetheart. She needed help." "Is she going to be okay?" "I think so. Go back to bed." Emma did not move. Instead, she tightened her arms around him, her face pressed against his chest. "You're the best person in the world, Dad." "I'm just doing what anyone would do." Even as he said it, Marcus knew it was not true. Most people would have driven past that wreck, unwilling to risk their own safety in a storm like that one. Most people would have called 911 and let someone else handle it. But Marcus had never been most people. The Navy had taught him that when someone needed help, you helped them. You did not calculate the risks or weigh the inconveniences. You acted because that was what decent human beings did. Lightning split the sky outside, it illuminating the bedroom door for a fraction of a second. Through the crack at the bottom, Marcus caught a glimpse of the woman's face, pale, still touched by shadows and light in equal measure. In that moment, he saw something in her that he could not name. Strength, authority, a quiet power that commanded attention without demanding it. This was not an ordinary person. She was someone important, someone whose absence right now was probably causing chaos somewhere in the world. But lying in his bed, unconscious and vulnerable, she was just a human being who had needed saving. And Marcus Callahan had always been good at saving people. It was keeping them that he had never mastered. Dawn arrived slowly, reluctantly, as if the sun itself was hesitant to reveal what the storm had left behind. The rain had stopped sometime before first light, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. Water dripped from the eaves, pooled in the yard, ran in small rivers down the cracked asphalt of the driveway. Marcus stood in the kitchen making coffee the way he had made it every morning for the past 3 years, strong black, no sugar. The routine was a comfort, a small anchor in a life that had been unmoored by loss. He measured the grounds, filled the pot, listened to the machine gurgle and hiss as it transformed water and beans into something that vaguely resembled sanity. He checked on the woman once cracking the bedroom door, just enough to see that she was still breathing. Her color was better this morning, less gray, more human. The bandage on her forehead had held through the night. She would live. That was when he heard her stir. He stepped back, giving her privacy, and returned to the kitchen. Emma would be up, soon needing breakfast before school. The routine would continue as it always did. Life did not stop for storms or strangers or the strange feeling that something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of his existence. Then he heard footsteps. Marcus turned around and the world stopped. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, wearing his white dress shirt like it belonged to her. Her dark hair was tousled, falling around her face in waves that caught the morning light. Her eyes, he could see them clearly now, sharp and intelligent, were fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being evaluated, measured, judged. She smiled. Not a warm smile, not a grateful smile. A smile that contained calculations and assessments, a smile that belonged in a boardroom or a war room, not in his shabby little kitchen. "Good morning?" Marcus felt heat rise to his face. "You're wearing my shirt. You left me lying in a pile of wet clothes. I found this." Her voice was controlled, confident, edged with something that might have been amusement. "I hope you don't mind." Before he could respond, Emma came bounding into the kitchen, her hair still wild from sleep, her backpack clutched in her hands. She stopped short when she saw the stranger, her eyes going wide. "Who are you?" The woman crouched down to Emma's level, her expression softening in a way that surprised Marcus. "Just someone your father rescued last night." Emma looked at her father, then back at the woman. "Dad saves everyone. He's like a superhero, except without the cape." The woman's smile changed, became something closer to genuine. "I can see that." Marcus cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. "I can call you a taxi or an Uber or whatever you no need." The woman straightened, moving to the counter where the coffee pot sat. She poured herself a cup without asking permission, as if this were her kitchen, her coffee, her right. My driver has been waiting outside since 6 this morning. Marcus blinked. You have a driver. He's been tracking my phone. He knew where I was the moment I stopped moving. Then why, Saum? Why am I still here? She took a sip of the coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. Because I wanted to thank you properly, and because I wanted to return this. She gestured at the shirt she was wearing. But she made no move to leave. She simply stood there, watching him waiting. Emma tugged at Marcus's sleeve. Dad, I'm going to be late for school. Go get your lunch from the fridge, sweetheart. I'll drive you in 5 minutes. Emma darted away, leaving Marcus alone with the woman. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, she set down her coffee cup and reached into her bag, a designer handbag that probably cost more than his truck, lying beside the sofa where she must have dropped it the night before. She pulled out a leather wallet, soft and thick, and from it extracted a stack of bills. $100 bills, crisp and new, arranged in a neat bundle. She set them on the counter between them. For last night, Marcus looked at the money. At least $2,000, maybe more. Enough to pay his electric bill for a year. Enough to fix the leak in the roof that had been spreading slowly, inexorably across his ceiling. Enough to give Emma the birthday party she deserved instead of the modest celebration he had been planning. He looked at the woman. For what? You saved my life. You gave me a bedclothes shelter. This is the least I can do. Marcus felt something shift inside him, something cold and sharp-edged. He had spent his whole life working with his hands, earning every dollar through sweat and skill. He had never taken charity, never accepted handouts, never let anyone think he could be bought. I didn't do it for money. The woman shrugged, a delicate movement that somehow conveyed both elegance and dismissal. Then consider it compensation for your trouble. Your shirt probably needs dry cleaning. Marcus picked up the money. The bills felt wrong in his hands, tainted somehow, as if accepting them would transform what he had done last night from an act of basic human decency into a transaction. He held them out to her, his arm rigid, his jaw tight. Take it back. I don't want your money. She did not reach for the bills. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him with those sharp, assessing eyes. Most men would take it. I'm not most men. No. A pause waited with something he could not identify. You're not. She regarded him for a long moment, and for the first time a crack appeared in her composed exterior. A flicker of something, confusion, respect, crossed her features before vanishing behind the mask of control. My mistake. She reached out and took the money, her fingers brushing against his as she did. I thought I was being generous. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. Generous. You think throwing money at someone is generosity? Then explain it to me. He met her gaze, holding it without flinching. Generosity is helping someone because it's the right thing to do, not because you owe them, not because you want something in return, just because they need help and you can give it. She stood very still. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by the drip of water from the eaves outside and the distant sound of Emma rummaging through the refrigerator. I see. Her voice was softer now, stripped of its earlier confidence. You're saying I turned a kind act into a business deal. That's exactly what I'm saying. The woman looked down at the money in her hands and back at him. Something shifted in her expression, not surrender, but acknowledgement. Recognition. You're right. I apologize. Marcus turned away, reaching for his own coffee cup. He did not want her apology. He did not want anything from her except for her to leave, to take her money and her expensive clothes and her world of drivers and designer bags and disappear back into whatever life she had come from. But she did not leave. Not immediately. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob, and looked back at him. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus Callahan. She repeated it slowly as if committing it to memory. Marcus Callahan, I won't forget. Then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack on lunch bag in hand. Was that your girlfriend, Dad? Despite everything, Marcus laughed. No, sweetheart. She's complicated. I liked her. She was pretty, and she smelled nice. She was also wearing my favorite shirt. Emma grinned the gap where she had lost a baby tooth last month, making her look impossibly young. Maybe she'll bring it back. Marcus scooped up his keys and ushered his daughter toward the door. Come on, you'll be late. But as he drove Emma to school, his mind kept returning to the woman. The way she had moved through his kitchen like she belonged there. The way she had looked at him when he refused her money, not with anger, but with something closer to wonder. He had a feeling he had not seen the last of her. He had no idea how right he was. The truth arrived that evening, delivered through the glowing screen of his ancient television set. Marcus was in the kitchen preparing dinner spaghetti with meat sauce, one of the few dishes he had mastered in the years since Sarah's death. Emma sat at the table behind him, working on her homework, her pencil scratching across paper in steady rhythm. The TV murmured in the background, a news channel that Marcus kept on more for the noise than the information. Then the anchor's voice cut through the domestic quiet sharp with the urgency that meant something important had happened. Breaking news tonight, Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, has returned to work following a car accident last night that nearly claimed her life. Sources say a local resident pulled Sterling from her burning vehicle just moments before it was engulfed in flames. Marcus froze the wooden spoon in his hand, suspended over the pot of sauce. He turned slowly toward the television, his heart hammering against his ribs. There she was, the woman from his kitchen, transformed. Gone was the disheveled hair, the borrowed shirt, the vulnerable trembling of a trauma survivor. In her place stood a figure of pure authority, immaculate in a tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair swept back from her face, her posture radiating power and control. She stood before an enormous glass building, reporters clustered around her like supplicants before a queen. Behind her, etched in steel letters against the facade of the building, was a name, Sterling Industries. The anchor continued, Sterling Industries, one of the Pacific Northwest's largest conglomerates, has holdings in technology manufacturing and commercial real estate. Victoria Sterling, who took over as CEO following her father's death 5 years ago, has been credited with transforming the company into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. The screen cut to Victoria herself, surrounded by microphones and flashing cameras. She looked directly into the lens, and for a moment Marcus could have sworn she was looking directly at him. I owe my life to a stranger who asked for nothing in return. He was kind, humble, and refused any compensation. That kind of integrity is rare. That kind of dignity cannot be purchased. Marcus stood motionless, the sauce forgotten, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The woman he had pulled from a burning car, the woman who had stood in his kitchen, wearing his shirt, drinking his coffee, offering him money like he was the hired help, was one of the wealthiest people in Oregon, possibly one of the wealthiest people in the Pacific Northwest, and she had spoken about him on national television. Emma appeared at his elbow, her homework abandoned. Dad, that's her. The woman from this morning. Yeah, sweetheart, that's her. She's famous. Apparently, Emma's eyes went wide with the particular excitement of a 12-year-old who had just discovered that her ordinary life had intersected with something extraordinary. You saved a CEO. That's so cool. Marcus turned off the stove and moved the pot to a coal burner. His appetite had vanished, replaced by a strange mixture of emotions he could not quite name. Relief that the woman was alive and well. Discomfort at seeing his act of basic decency broadcast to the world. And underneath it all, a nagging sense that this was not over, that Victoria Sterling was not the type of person who let debts go unpaid no matter what he had said about not wanting her money. Dad, Emma's voice pulled him back to the present. Do you think she'll come back? Marcus looked at his daughter, this small, fierce, wonderful person who was the only reason he got out of bed most mornings. I don't think so, sweetheart. People like her don't usually spend time in neighborhoods like ours. Emma nodded slowly, processing this. Then with the matter-of-fact wisdom that children sometimes possessed, I hope she does, though. She seemed nice. Underneath all the fancy stuff, I mean. Marcus smiled despite himself. Emma had always had a gift for seeing past surfaces, for finding the human being beneath the armor. It was one of the things he loved most about her, and one of the things that terrified him most. The world was not kind to people who saw too clearly. Come on, he said, turning back to the stove. Let's eat. You've got homework to finish. But as they sat down to dinner, Marcus could not shake the feeling that something had changed. The woman Victoria had walked into his life like a storm, and like all storms, she had left wreckage in her wake. The question was whether he would be able to rebuild or whether the damage would prove permanent. 3 days passed, 3 days of normality of work and school and the 1,000 small tasks that comprised a life. Marcus fixed a leaking pipe in a house on the west side of town. He replaced a faulty electrical panel in an apartment building downtown. He drove Emma to school and picked her up afterward, helped her with her homework, made sure she ate her vegetables and went to bed on time. He tried to forget about Victoria Sterling. He failed. Her face kept appearing in his mind at odd moments while he was elbow deep in a wall fishing for a stubborn wire. While he was sitting at a red light, waiting for the signal to change. While he was lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the old house settle around him. The way she had looked at him when he refused her money. The way her voice had softened when she apologized. The way she had repeated his name as if she were making a promise. On the morning of the 4th day, Marcus was at Emma's school fixing a burst pipe in the teacher's lounge. It was routine work, the kind of job he could do in his sleep. Locate the leak, shut off the water, cut out the damaged section solder in a replacement. His hands moved with the automatic precision of long practice, leaving his mind free to wander. He was thinking about Sarah, about the way she used to laugh at his jokes, even the bad ones, about the way she would stand behind him while he worked her hands on his shoulders, her chin resting on the top of his head, about the way she had looked in those final weeks pale and thin, but still fighting, still smiling, still trying to make everyone around her feel better, even as she was dying. 3 years. It had been 3 years since she passed. 3 years of raising Emma alone, of working himself to exhaustion, of trying to fill the void she had left behind. Some days it felt like yesterday, other days it felt like a lifetime ago. The sound of an engine pulled him from his thoughts. It was not the sound of a minivan or an SUV, the vehicles that typically populated school parking lots. This was something different. A low, smooth purr that spoke of precision engineering and obscene amounts of money. A sound like a predator's growl, quiet but unmistakable. Marcus straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. Through the window of the teacher's lounge, he could see the parking lot. A black sedan had pulled in sleek and polished, so out of place among the modest cars and trucks that it might as well have been a spaceship. The driver's door opened. Victoria Sterling stepped out. She was dressed differently today, a white blazer over a dark blouse, tailored pants, heels that clicked against the asphalt like a metronome. Sunglasses hid her eyes, but there was no mistaking her. She moved with the same confident stride he remembered from his kitchen, the same sense of owning every space she entered. She was walking directly toward him. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. He glanced down at himself, work boots caked with mud, jeans stained with pipe-dope flannel shirt that had seen better days. He looked exactly like what he was, a working man, a tradesman, someone who earned his living with his hands and his sweat. She did not seem to notice. Or if she did not care. Mr. Callahan, she stopped a few feet away, removing her sunglasses to reveal those sharp, assessing eyes. We need to talk. Around them, the parking lot had gone quiet. Parents who had been chatting by their cars were now staring. Teachers who had been walking to the building had stopped in their tracks. Everyone was watching, drawn by the magnetic pull of wealth and power that surrounded Victoria Sterling like an invisible force field. Marcus kept his voice level. If this is about money again, it's not about money. She reached into her bag and pulled out a phone, turning the screen toward him. It's about the truth. On the screen was security footage, grainy, time-stamped, but unmistakably him. He was carrying a woman out of a burning car, rain streaming down his face, his expression fierce with determination. He watched himself stumble through the mud, watched the car erupt in flames behind him, watched the woman in his arms go limp. You saved my life. Victoria's voice was different now, stripped of its corporate polish, almost vulnerable. I need to show you something. She swiped to another video, this one clearer, taken from a different angle. The footage showed the moment before the crash, Victoria's car driving normally down the highway while headlights cutting through the rain. Then without warning, the steering wheel jerked hard to the right. The car swerved across the road, hit the shoulder, and slammed into the tree. Marcus frowned. What am I looking at? Watch the steering wheel. He watched again. This time he saw it, the sudden violent movement of the wheel happening too fast and too smoothly to be the result of human hands. It was mechanical, automated, like the car had decided to crash itself. Someone tampered with my vehicle. Victoria's voice was flat controlled, but he could hear the anger underneath. Someone wanted me dead, and if you hadn't been on that road at exactly the right moment. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Marcus looked at the footage again, his military training kicking in. He had spent 20 years working with complex machinery, understanding how systems functioned and how they could fail. What he was seeing was not a failure. It was sabotage. The steering system is electronic in that model. His voice came out rough, analytical. If someone got into the software, they could override the driver's inputs, make the car go wherever they wanted. Victoria nodded. That's what my security team concluded. Someone hacked my car. Who? For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed her features. That's what I intend to find out. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. The woman standing before him was not just wealthy, she was a target. Someone had tried to kill her, and they had nearly succeeded. If he had not been on that road, if he had not stopped, if he had been even a few minutes later. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe you the truth, and because... She hesitated, and in that hesitation, he glimpsed something beneath the armor. Something human. Because I need to know I can trust someone. And you're the only person who's ever done anything for me without expecting something in return. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marcus thought about his life, the small house, the endless bills, the constant struggle to make ends meet. He thought about Emma, about the opportunities he could not give her, about the birthday parties and vacations and college funds that remained forever out of reach. And then he thought about the look in Victoria's eyes when she had offered him that money. The calculation there, the assumption that everything and everyone had a price. He had proven her wrong once. He would not prove her right now. What do you want from me? She reached into her bag again and pulled out an envelope. Inside were documents, official-looking papers with legal jargon and corporate letterheads. She handed them to him. I own the building your house is in. As of 2 days ago, I purchased the entire complex. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. You did what? Your rent has been paid in full. The house belongs to you now, free and clear. No more monthly payments, no more landlord, it's yours. He stared at the papers, his vision blurring slightly. The words swam before his eyes, deed transfer, property rights, ownership certificate. His name was printed at the top, clear and unmistakable. I can't accept this. You already have. The paperwork is filed. It's done. You can't just... I can. Her voice was firm again, the CEO reasserting herself. And I did. Not because I owe you, Marcus. Because it's the right thing to do. You saved my life. You asked for nothing. The least I can do is make sure you have a roof over your head. Marcus thought about all the nights he had lain awake calculating whether he could make the rent. All the jobs he had taken, dangerous, exhausting, sometimes humiliating, just to keep Emma housed and fed. All the dreams he had deferred, the opportunities he had passed up, the sacrifices he had made without complaint. And now, with a few strokes of a pen, Victoria Sterling had erased the heaviest burden from his shoulders. He should have been grateful. He should have been relieved. Instead, he felt something else entirely, a complicated mixture of pride and resentment, gratitude and shame. I didn't do it for a house. I know. Victoria's voice softened. That's exactly why you deserve one. She handed him another document, a glossy brochure with a familiar logo. He looked at it and felt his breath catch. The Callahan Fund. I'm starting a foundation, Victoria continued. Support for single parents, especially single fathers. Financial assistance, job training, childcare subsidies. I want to help people like you, Marcus. People who are working themselves to the bone just to keep their families together. He looked up from the brochure. You named it after me. I named it after the only kind of strength I truly respect. Quiet strength, honest strength, human strength. Marcus stood there, the brochure in one hand, the deed to his house in the other. Around them, the parking lot had filled with whispers, parents and teachers pointing, speculating, taking photos on their phones. He barely noticed. Wow, the word came out rough, almost accusatory. Why are you doing this? Victoria met his gaze without flinching. Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten. What? That money can't buy character. That it can't buy courage. and it definitely can't buy the kind of man who carries a stranger out of a burning car without asking for anything in return. She reached out and laid a hand on his arm, a brief touch there, and gone in an instant. I want you to help me run the fund. You know these neighborhoods, these people. You know what they actually need, not what some consultant in a boardroom thinks they need. I want you to keep me grounded, keep me honest. Make sure this foundation actually helps people, instead of just making me feel better about my wealth. Marcus looked at his daughter's school behind him. Through the fence, he could see the playground where Emma spent her recess running and laughing with her friends. He thought about all the other kids on that playground, kids from families like his families that were one missed paycheck away from disaster. If I agree, his voice was cautious, measured. We do this my way. No press events, no photo ops, just real help for real people. Victoria extended her hand. Agreed. He shook it. Her grip was firm, confident, equal. One more thing, she said, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. What? I still have your shirt. Despite everything, the shock, the confusion, the overwhelming strangeness of the moment, Marcus laughed. It was a genuine sound, rough and rusty from disuse, but real. Keep it. You look better in it than I do. The smile broke through fully now, transforming her face. That's debatable. A reporter had materialized from somewhere, local paper, from the look of the badge around her neck. She pushed forward, phone held out like a weapon. Miss Sterling, are you and Mr. Callahan dating? Victoria glanced at Marcus, her eyes sparkling with something that might have been mischief. Not yet, but he did lend me his favorite shirt. Laughter rippled through the growing crowd. Marcus shook his head, feeling his face flush. You're impossible. I prefer determined. Emina came running across the playground, her braids flying behind her. She skidded to a stop in front of them, breathing hard, her eyes wide. Dad, that's the lady from the news. Yes, sweetheart, that's her. Emma looked at Victoria with the direct, assessing gaze of a child who had learned early that adults could not always be trusted. Are you going to help my dad? Victoria crouched down to Emma's level, her expression serious. I'm going to try my very best. Then I approve. Emma nodded firmly, but only if you are nice to him. My dad is the best dad in the world. Victoria smiled, not the practiced smile of a CEO, but something softer, more genuine. I can see that. Then, to Marcus's surprise, Emma stepped forward and hugged Victoria. A brief embrace, spontaneous and innocent. Victoria stood frozen for a moment, caught off guard, before slowly putting her arms around the girl. When Emma pulled back and ran off toward her friends, Victoria straightened slowly. Her eyes looked suspiciously bright. She's remarkable. She's everything. Victoria nodded as if she understood exactly what he meant. Then let's make sure you can give her everything she deserves. She turned and walked back to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement. At the door, she paused and looked back. I'll send the paperwork this week. And Marcus? Yeah, thank you for reminding me why I started this company in the first place. Why was that? To help the people who helped me when I had nothing. She got into the car and the door closed behind her. The sedan pulled away, disappearing around the corner with a whisper of expensive engineering. Marcus stood in the parking lot, papers in hand, heart pounding. Around him, the world had returned to normal, parents chatting, teachers walking, children laughing. But nothing felt normal anymore. A door had opened, and he had no idea what lay on the other side. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus sat alone in the darkened living room. The envelope from Victoria lay on the coffee table before him, unopened since he had brought it home. The deed to his house, the brochure for the Callahan Fund, the papers that represented a seismic shift in his circumstances, all of it waiting for him to engage with it, to accept it, to let it become real. He reached out and touched the edge of the envelope. His fingers trembled slightly, as if what lay inside were not paper, but something alive, something that could change the entire trajectory of his life. The memories came then, as they always did in the quiet hours. Sarah, her red hair catching the light through the kitchen window, her laugh bright and sudden filling every corner of their small house, her hands always moving, always creating knitting blankets, arranging flowers, reaching out to touch his face when he came home tired and frustrated. She had died 3 years ago. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days if he was counting. and he was always counting. The cancer had been aggressive stage 4 by the time they found it, already spreading through her body like an invading army. The doctors had given her 6 months. She had lasted nearly 2 years fighting with a ferocity that had left everyone who knew her in awe. He remembered the endless nights in the hospital, sitting beside her bed, while machines beeped and clicked around them. The antiseptic smell that burned his throat. The sound of her breathing growing shallower, day by day, hour by hour. He remembered her hand in his, so small and fragile, the wedding ring loose on her finger, because she had lost so much weight. On the last night, she had looked at him with eyes that were still clear, still sharp, still full of the fire that had made him fall in love with her 30 years ago. Marcus, her voice was barely a whisper. Promise me. Anything. Don't let Emma go without. Work hard. Give her everything. I promise. And Marcus? She had squeezed his hand with what little strength remained. Don't close off your heart. She needs you happy. You deserve to be happy. He had promised. He had held her cooling body and screamed into the darkness until his voice gave out. And then he had gotten up the next morning and made breakfast for Emma because that was what she needed him to do. In the years since Marcus had thrown himself into work with a desperation that bordered on self-destruction, 3 jobs at once, sometimes 4, anything that paid anything that kept him too exhausted to think. Because when he stopped moving, he had to feel. And feeling meant pain. Only Emma kept him anchored, her smile in the morning, her questions about the world endless and curious. The way she looked at him like he was a superhero, cape or no cape. But the truth he never told anyone was that he was barely holding on. His bank account had $300 in it. The electric bill was past due. The rent before Victoria's intervention had been 3 weeks late, and the landlord was making noises about eviction. Every night Marcus went to sleep wondering if tomorrow would be the day everything fell apart. Every morning he got up and kept fighting because Emma needed him to fight. And now Victoria Sterling had walked into his life and removed the heaviest weight from his shoulders. No more rent. No more fear of losing the roof over their heads. No more waking up in a cold sweat calculating whether he could make the numbers work for another month. He should have been grateful. He should have been relieved. Instead, he was terrified, because accepting help meant admitting he needed it. And needing help meant he had failed, Sarah failed, Emma failed the promise he had made on that last night. A man takes care of his own, his father's voice echoing down through the decades. He doesn't ask for handouts. He doesn't accept charity. He works and he provides, and he never lets anyone see him weak. Marcus had believed that all his life. It had gotten him through boot camp, through 20 years of Navy service, through the worst months of Sarah's illness. Stubborn pride had been his armor against a world that seemed determined to break him. But armor got heavy after a while, and sometimes the strongest thing a man could do was admit he could not carry the weight alone. He opened the envelope. The deed was real. His name was printed at the top in crisp black letters. The house, this small, worn, beloved house, where he had built a life with Sarah, where he was raising Emma, where every room held 1,000 memories, was his. No more rent, no more landlord, no more sword hanging over his head. Marcus Callahan bent forward and wept. Not the quiet tears of everyday grief, but deep, wrenching sobs that tore through him like a storm. 3 years of fear and exhaustion and desperate hope came pouring out, and he let it come, let himself feel it all for the first time since Sarah had died. He did not know how long he sat there crying in the darkness. Long enough for the tears to run dry. Long enough for the tightness in his chest to ease, replaced by something that felt almost like peace. The creak of the bedroom door made him look up. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed bear, her face creased with sleep and worry. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Marcus wiped his face quickly, but he could not hide the evidence of his tears. "Just feeling some feelings, sweetheart. Come here." She crossed the room and climbed onto the sofa beside him, curling into his side the way she had since she was small. "Is it about Mom?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He had tried so hard to shield Emma from his grief, to be strong for her, to never let her see him fall apart. "Sometimes I miss her a lot." Emma nodded against his chest. "Me too. But you know what? What? I think she'd be proud of you. You're doing really good, Dad, even when it's hard." Marcus tightened his arm around her, holding on to her like she was the only thing keeping him from drowning. You think so? I know so. Emma's voice was certain the way only a child's voice could be. And now that Victoria lady is going to help us? Mom would like that. She always said good things happen to people who deserve them. Marcus closed his eyes, letting his daughter's words wash over him. Sarah had said that in the early days of their marriage, when they were young and broke and full of impossible dreams, he had forgotten. He had let himself forget so many things in the fog of grief. I love you, Emma. I love you too, Daddy. They sat there together in the darkness, father and daughter holding on to each other as the night deepened around them. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, pinpricks of light in an infinite black canvas. Something had shifted tonight. Some wall had crumbled, some door had opened. Marcus did not know yet what lay on the other side, but for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than fear when he thought about the future. He felt hope. Meanwhile, in a penthouse overlooking downtown Portland, Victoria Sterling stood before a wall of windows, watching the city lights sparkle below. The skyline was beautiful from up here, a glittering constellation of human ambition, each light representing a life, a story, a struggle. She held a glass of wine in her hand, but she had not taken a single sip. On the table behind her, Marcus Callahan's white shirt lay neatly folded. She had washed it herself, dried it carefully, kept it close. Not because she had forgotten to return it, she forgot nothing but because she did not want to let it go. She lifted the shirt to her face, breathing in the scent of cheap laundry detergent and honest work. It smelled nothing like the designer fabrics that filled her closets, the Egyptian cotton sheets on her bed, the silk blouses that cost more than most people earned in a month. It smelled like home. A single tear fell sudden and unexpected. Victoria Sterling, CEO billionaire, one of the most powerful women in the Pacific Northwest, stood alone in her penthouse and cried. For a moment, she was 12 years old again. Foster home number 7 or maybe 8, she had lost count by then. Dinner was bread and water, and she was so hungry she had stolen an apple from the kitchen. Mr. Morrison, the foster father, with the beer belly and the permanent smell of alcohol, had caught her. The slap had knocked her to the floor. The beating that followed had left welts across her back that took weeks to heal. Victoria had not cried then. She had learned not to cry. Tears were weakness, and weakness got you hurt. At 14, in a group home on the outskirts of Seattle, a group of older girls had shoved her head into a locker and held it there until she nearly passed out. You'll never be anything, they had told her. You're garbage. Nobody wants you. She had not cried then either. At 16, she had tried to end it. A razor blade in a bathroom, warm water turning pink with her blood. A social worker had found her in time, stitched her up, sent her to therapy. No one had asked why she wanted to die. No one had asked about the foster homes, the beatings, the endless parade of adults who were supposed to protect her and did exactly the opposite. At 18, she had gotten a scholarship to college, full-ride business major. She had studied 20 hours a day, never dated, never made friends, never allowed herself to need anyone. Because needing people meant being hurt by them, and she had been hurt enough. By 25, she had become the youngest CEO in Sterling Industries history. Her biological father, William Sterling, had died of a heart attack, leaving the company to his only living child, the daughter he had abandoned to the foster system 30 years earlier, when her mother died and he decided raising a child alone was too inconvenient. Victoria had taken his company and made it her own. She had tripled its value, expanded into new markets, destroyed competitors who underestimated her. She had built an empire from the ashes of her childhood, a fortress of money and power that no one could breach. But fortresses were lonely places. In all her years of success, no one had ever looked at Victoria Sterling and seen a person. They saw the money. They saw the power. They saw what she could do for them. Until Marcus Callahan. He had pulled her from a burning car without knowing who she was. He had given her his bed, his shirt, his care. And when she had offered him money, tried to turn his kindness into a transaction, tried to put their interaction on terms, she understood he had shoved it back at her like it was an insult. I didn't do it for money. Those words had haunted her for 3 days. They had followed her into meetings and dinners, into the shower and the bedroom, into her dreams. A man who did not want her money. A man who had looked at her and seen someone worth saving even when she was bleeding and broken and had nothing to offer him. She had not known such men existed. Victoria hugged the shirt to her chest and let herself cry. Really cry for the first time in decades. Sobs that came from somewhere deep inside, painful and raw, and somehow healing. Her phone buzzed. A message from her stepmother, Eleanor Sterling. I heard about your hero. Don't be foolish, Victoria. Men like that only want one thing, and it isn't your charming personality. You're embarrassing the family. Victoria stared at the message, feeling the old familiar anger rise in her chest. Eleanor had married her father when Victoria was 22, already in business school, already clawing her way towards success. The woman had never accepted her, never wanted her, had spent the past 15 years trying to push her out of the company and claim the sterling fortune for herself and her son Richard. She deleted the message and blocked the number. Eleanor was not family, she never had been. For the first time in her life, Victoria allowed herself to imagine what real family might look like. A man who would stand beside her, not behind her. A child who would look at her with trust instead of calculation. A home that was warm with love instead of cold with ambition. She thought about Marcus standing in his shabby kitchen with his calloused hands and his fierce pride. She thought about Emma with her bright eyes and her instant easy affection. She thought about the way Marcus had looked at her when she apologized, like he was surprised anyone had ever admitted to being wrong in his presence. Victoria Sterling had spent her entire life running from the scared little girl she used to be. Building walls, accumulating power, making sure no one could ever hurt her again. But walls also kept people out. And power, she was beginning to understand, was a poor substitute for connection. Tomorrow she would begin the work of establishing the Callahan Fund. She would help people, really help them, not just throw money at problems to make herself feel better. She would learn from Marcus how to do things right. And maybe if she was very lucky, she would learn how to be human again. Outside her window, the city sparkled on, oblivious to the transformation happening in the penthouse above. The following week passed in a blur of paperwork and planning. Victoria threw herself into the Callahan Fund with the same intensity she brought to everything else. But this time there was something different in her approach. Instead of making decisions from the top down, she consulted with Marcus at every step. He met her in coffee shops and community centers, never at her office, never at expensive restaurants. He introduced her to families in his neighborhood, single parents struggling to make ends meet, veterans who had come home to find no jobs waiting for them, elderly couples trying to survive on fixed incomes. She listened, really listened in a way she had not done in years. She asked questions and waited for answers. She took notes in a small leather notebook that Marcus had given her, a replacement for the tablet she usually carried. He said because real people responded better to pen and paper than to screens. You can't build trust with technology, he had told her. Trust is built face-to-face, one conversation at a time. She was beginning to understand what he meant. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself grappling with the strange new reality of his circumstances. The house was his, now truly his, not rented, not borrowed, not at risk. He walked through the rooms, sometimes running his hand along the walls, still not quite believing it. Emma had noticed the change in him. You're smiling more, Dad, she told him one morning over breakfast. You look less tired. He had not realized how much of his exhaustion had shown until she pointed it out. 3 years of carrying an impossible weight, and now that weight was gone. He was sleeping better, eating better, standing a little straighter. But underneath the relief, questions gnawed at him. The security footage Victoria had shown him haunted his dreams. The steering wheel jerking violently, the car careening off the road, the flames that would have consumed her if he had arrived even a minute later. Someone had tried to kill her. Someone had hacked into her car's computer system and deliberately caused the crash. And that someone was still out there, unpunished, unidentified. Marcus had spent 20 years in the Navy solving complex mechanical problems under pressure. He knew how systems worked, how they could fail, how they could be sabotaged. And the more he thought about what he had seen in that footage, the more certain he became that this was not a random attack. This was personal. He started researching quietly, carefully, not wanting to alarm Emma or distract Victoria from her work with the fund. He read articles about automotive security vulnerabilities, about the hacking tools that could override electronic steering systems, about the handful of cases where similar attacks had been documented. He also researched Sterling Industries. The company was massive, a conglomerate with interests in technology, manufacturing, real estate, and a dozen other sectors. Victoria's father, William Sterling, had built it from a small machine shop in the 1970s into a multi-billion-dollar empire. When he died 5 years ago, Victoria had inherited majority control, but she was not the only heir. Richard Sterling Williams' son from his second marriage held a significant minority stake. According to the articles Marcus found, Richard had challenged Victoria's leadership, repeatedly arguing that he should be running the company instead. There had been proxy fights, boardroom battles, legal disputes that had cost millions in attorney fees. Marcus looked at Richard Sterling's a smooth, polished face with perfectly styled hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He had seen faces like that in the Navy, usually attached to officers who cared more about their careers than their sailors. And then there was Eleanor, Richard's mother, William Sterling's widow, who controlled a substantial portion of the family's non-corporate assets and had been fighting Victoria in court over the estate for years. The picture that emerged was not pretty. Victoria Sterling was not just wealthy, she was surrounded by people who wanted what she had and were willing to fight dirty to get it. The question was, how dirty were they willing to get? On a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after the accident, Marcus drove to the impound lot where Victoria's wrecked car had been taken. She had given him authorization to examine it, had seemed surprised and touched that he wanted to actually. Most people would have forgotten about the crash by now, she had said. Moved on. Someone tried to kill you. That's not something I can just move on from. The car was a total lost frame, twisted engine compartment, gutted by fire interior, reduced to charred wreckage. But Marcus was not interested in the obvious damage. He was looking for something else. It took him 3 hours of crawling under and around the vehicle, but he found it. A small device roughly the size of a pack of cigarettes tucked behind the dashboard where the steering column connected to the electronic control module. It was burned and damaged, but still recognizable to someone who knew what he was looking at. A hardware implant. Someone had physically installed this device in Victoria's car, giving them the ability to override the steering system remotely. This was not some random hacker exploiting a software vulnerability from the other side of the world. This was someone with direct access to the vehicle. Marcus took photos, made notes, carefully removed the device, and sealed it in an evidence bag he had brought from home. His hands were steady, his mind clear. This was work he understood, methodical, technical, precise. The bigger question, who had done this and why, was beyond his expertise. But he knew someone who might be able to help. He called Victoria that afternoon. I found something. We need to talk. They met at a diner on the east side of town, a place where no one would recognize Victoria Sterling, where the coffee was strong and the booths offered privacy. Marcus laid the evidence bag on the table between them. Someone installed this in your car. It's a hardware override device, lets them take control of your steering remotely. Professional grade, not something you buy at Radio Shack. Victoria stared at the device, her face pale. You're saying someone with physical access to your car, someone who knew what they were doing, someone who wanted you dead and almost got their wish. She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled, but he could hear the fear underneath. Richard has been fighting me for control of the company for years. He has a mechanical engineering degree. He would know how to do something like this. Your brother. Half-brother. We share a father, nothing else. He's always resented me for existing, for inheriting, for being better at running the company than he could ever be. She laughed bitterly. I knew he hated me. I didn't know he wanted me dead. Marcus watched her absorb the implications. He could see the wheels turning in her head, the CEO taking over from the vulnerable woman who had sat in his kitchen wearing his shirt. We need to go to the police. With what? Victoria shook her head. A burnt device and a theory Richard has expensive lawyers. He'll claim it was planted or tampered with, or that I'm trying to frame him. Without more evidence. Then we find more evidence. She looked at him, really looked the way she had that first morning in his kitchen. You'd do that? Help me investigate my own brother. Someone tried to kill you, Victoria. I don't care who it was. If they're not stopped, they'll try again. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact between them. Thank you. Her voice was thick with emotion. I don't know why you keep helping me. I don't know what I did to deserve. You don't need to deserve help. That's what I keep trying to tell you. Sometimes people help each other just because it's the right thing to do. She squeezed his hand tightly, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression hardened. It's my stepmother. She's demanding a family meeting. Says she has concerns about my recent public appearances with, she glanced at Marcus, with my blue-collar charity case. Marcus felt a flash of anger on her behalf. Charming. Eleanor has never been known for her subtlety or her kindness. Victoria stood pulling on her coat. I should deal with this. But Marcus, she hesitated. I want you to come with me to a family meeting. They're going to attack me, attack you, attack everything we're trying to build. I want them to see that I'm not alone, that I have someone in my corner who isn't there for the money. It was a lot to ask, meeting the family of a woman he had known for only a few weeks, walking into what was clearly going to be a hostile situation, putting himself on display for people who already despised him. But he thought about the device in the evidence bag, about the steering wheel, jerking the car, crashing the flames, consuming everything. When, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, I'll send a car. Marcus shook his head. I'll drive myself, and I'll meet you there. Victoria smiled, a real smile, the kind that softened her sharp features and made her look almost approachable. Independence. I like that about you. Among other things, getting ahead of yourself, Mr. Callahan. But she was still smiling as she walked out of the diner, and Marcus found himself smiling too. The Sterling estate was everything Marcus had expected and nothing he was prepared for. The property sat on 50 acres outside Portland, accessed through a private road that wound through old-growth forest before emerging into manicured grounds that could have graced the cover of a magazine. The house itself was more mansion than home, a sprawling structure of stone and glass that seemed designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Marcus parked his truck in the circular driveway, acutely aware of how out of place it looked among the luxury vehicles already there. A Mercedes, a BMW, a Porsche. His Ford F-150 with its dented fender and rust spots was like a mutt at a dog show. He straightened his tie, the only tie he owned, a dark blue one Sarah had given him for their 20th anniversary, and walked to the front door. Victoria met him there. She was dressed for battle, a black suit that fit her like armor. Her hair pulled back severely from her face, her expression carefully neutral. But when she saw him, something in her eyes softened. You came. I said I would. She took his hand. Whatever happens in there, remember they don't define me, and they don't define you. The interior of the house was as overwhelming as the exterior: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork on the walls that probably cost more than his entire house. Victoria led him through a series of rooms, each more opulent than the last, until they reached a formal dining room, dominated by a table long enough to seat a small army. 2 people were already seated. At the head of the table sat Eleanor Sterling. She was 60 years old, perfectly preserved, with silver hair, swept back from a face that had been surgically maintained within an inch of its life. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. Her eyes, when they turned to Marcus, were cold enough to freeze water. Beside her was Richard Sterling, 40 years old, handsome in a polished, practiced way, wearing a suit that cost more than Marcus earned in a month. His smile was wit and white and completely devoid of warmth. Ah, the hero arrives. Eleanor's voice dripped with disdain. Please sit. Make yourself comfortable in my home. Marcus took the chair Victoria indicated, keeping his face neutral. 20 years of Navy service had taught him to stay calm in hostile environments. This was no different, just a different kind of combat. Thank you for having us. His voice was steady, polite, but not deferential. Mrs. Sterling. I didn't have a choice. Eleanor's gaze moved to Victoria. My stepdaughter has made it clear that her new association takes precedence over family obligations. Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm here, Eleanor. What is it you wanted to discuss? Direct as always, fine. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Marcus. Mr. Callahan, I understand you saved Victoria's life. Very heroic. I also understand that since then, you have acquired a free house, a foundation named after you, and apparently access to my stepdaughter's bed. Eleanor, Victoria's voice was sharp. Let me finish. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. I want to know what your end game is, Mr. Callahan. What is it you really want? Because I've seen men like you before. Men who see opportunity and know how to exploit it. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. With respect, Mrs. Sterling, you don't know anything about men like me. Enlighten me. Men like me work for what we have. We don't take handouts. We don't exploit anyone. He kept his voice level, his words measured. I saved your stepdaughter's life because she needed help, and I was there. That's all. Everything that's happened since the house, the foundation, that was her choice, not mine. I tried to refuse. Eleanor's laugh was sharp and brittle. And yet here you sit at my table in my home wearing a suit that I'm certain you did not pay for. This suit belonged to my father. He wore it to my mother's funeral and to my wedding and to his own funeral 3 years later. It's the only suit I own. Marcus paused, letting that sink in. I don't need your money, Mrs. Sterling. I don't need your approval. I'm here because Victoria asked me to be here. That's the only reason. The room was silent. Richard had stopped smiling, his expression calculating as he studied Marcus with new interest. Eleanor looked like she had been slapped. Victoria reached under the table and squeezed Marcus's hand. Eleanor recovered quickly, her face smoothing back into its mask of aristocratic disdain. How touching. The noble blue-collar worker untainted by the corruptions of wealth. She turned to Victoria. Do you really expect me to believe this fairy tale that a man with nothing to offer somehow won your affection through sheer virtue? What I believe, Victoria said quietly, is my business, not yours. It is very much my business when you're making a spectacle of yourself in the press. EO falls for her rescuer. Do you have any idea how that looks? The stock dropped 3 points last week because of this circus. The stock dropped because of the quarterly earnings report, which was affected by the supply chain issues Richard created when he insisted on changing vendors against my recommendation. Victoria's voice was ice. Don't blame my personal life for his professional failures. Richard finally spoke up, his voice smooth and oily. Now, sister dear, let's not make this about business. This is about family. Is it? Victoria leaned forward. Then let's talk about family, Richard. Let's talk about the device Marcus found in my car. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'm sorry, Richard's face was a perfect mask of confusion. What device? A hardware override unit, professional grade, installed behind my steering column. Someone used it to hack my car and cause the accident that nearly killed me. Eleanor's face had gone pale. Richard's expression remained carefully neutral. That's a serious accusation, he said. I hope you have evidence to back it up. I have the device. I have photos documenting where it was installed, and I have a witness, Victoria glanced at Marcus, who can testify to exactly what he found. This is absurd. Eleanor's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. You can't possibly be suggesting that someone in this family... I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Someone tried to kill me. Someone with physical access to my car and the technical knowledge to install a sophisticated hacking device. That's a very short list of people, Mother. The word hung in the air, heavy with irony. Eleanor was not Victoria's mother and never would be. Richard stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the marble floor. I don't have to listen to this. You're clearly having some kind of breakdown, Victoria. The stress of the accident, the media attention, it's affected your judgment. Sit down, Richard. The command in Victoria's voice stopped him mid-step. For a moment, the two siblings stared at each other. Victoria calm and controlled, Richard bristling with barely contained anger. I said, sit down. He sat. I'm not making accusations tonight, Victoria continued. I'm not going to the police, not yet, but I want you both to understand something. Her gaze moved from Eleanor to Richard and back again. If I find out that either of you had anything to do with that accident, I will destroy you. Not just professionally, not just financially. I will burn your lives to the ground and salt the earth so nothing ever grows there again. Silence. Marcus watched the interplay, seeing years of family dysfunction laid bare in a few charged moments. This was not a family. This was a battlefield. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You would threaten your own family. You were never my family. Victoria stood. My mother died when I was 2 years old. My father abandoned me to foster care rather than raise me himself. I spent 16 years being beaten, starved, and abused by people who were supposed to protect me. And when I finally clawed my way out of that hell, I found you waiting, a vulture circling what you thought was a carcass, ready to pick the bones clean. She leaned across the table, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. But I'm not a carcass, Eleanor. I'm not dead, and I'm not going anywhere. Victoria straightened, took Marcus's hand, and walked toward the door. Behind them, Eleanor's voice rang out. You're making a mistake. He's using you. Can't you see that? Victoria paused at the threshold. Without turning around, she said, the only mistake I ever made was thinking I needed your approval to be happy. And then they were out in the cool night air, walking toward Marcus's truck, leaving behind the mansion and everything it represented. They drove in silence for a long time, the lights of the city growing brighter as they left the suburbs behind. Victoria stared out the window, her reflection a ghost against the glass. Finally, Marcus spoke. You okay? I don't know. Her voice was tired, stripped of its usual confidence. I've spent my whole life fighting them. Fighting to prove that I belonged, that I deserved what I had. And tonight, standing in that room, she shook her head. I realized I don't want to fight anymore. Not them, not for their approval. Then don't. She turned to look at him. It's that simple. Simple and easy aren't the same thing. He kept his eyes on the road. But yeah, it can be that simple. You decide what matters. You let go of what doesn't. The rest takes care of itself. Victoria was quiet for another mile. Then, how did you do it after your wife died? How did you keep going? The question caught him off guard. He thought about deflecting, about changing the subject, about all the ways he had learned to avoid talking about Sarah. Instead, he told the truth. I didn't, not at first. For the first 6 months, I was just going through the motions. Getting Emma to school, going to work, coming home, going to bed. I wasn't living. I was just existing. What changed? Emma, one night she came into my room. I hadn't been sleeping, just lying there staring at the ceiling, and she climbed into bed with me and said, Daddy, it's okay to be sad, but I need you to be happy sometimes too. She was 9 years old and she was taking care of me. He felt his throat tighten at the memory. After that, I made a decision. I couldn't bring Sarah back. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could choose to be present for my daughter, to give her a father who was actually there, not just a ghost wearing her dad's face. Victoria reached over and laid her hand on his arm. You're a good man, Marcus Callahan. I try to be. No, her voice was firm. You are. You don't try, you just are. It's who you are at your core, and that's the rarest thing in the world. They pulled up in front of her apartment building, a sleek high-rise in downtown Portland, all glass and steel, nothing like the humble house where they had first met. Victoria did not move to get out. Stay with me tonight. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, felt the weight of the invitation and everything it implied. Victoria, I'm not asking for anything you are not ready to give. She took a breath. I don't want to be alone tonight. After everything that happened at that house, after saying those things to Eleanor and Richard, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. And I need someone to remind me that there's solid ground somewhere. Marcus looked at her, this powerful, brilliant, wounded woman who had walked into his life and turned it upside down. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he had made on her last night. Don't close off your heart. You deserve to be happy. Okay. Victoria's face broke into a smile, genuine, unguarded, beautiful. They went upstairs together. Nothing happened that night except sleep. Victoria changed into pajamas in the bathroom, while Marcus sat awkwardly on the edge of a sofa that probably cost more than his truck. When she emerged, she looked younger somehow. Softer, the armor of the CEO stripped away to reveal something more vulnerable underneath. She did not make any moves. Neither did he. They simply lay down on her enormous bed, he on top of the covers, she beneath them, and talked until the early hours of the morning. She told him about the foster homes, the beatings, the hunger, the endless parade of adults who were supposed to care for her and didn't. She told him about the night that she had tried to end her life and the long, slow process of deciding to keep living. He told her about the Navy, the deployments, the close calls, the friendships forged in fire, and the losses that still haunted him. He told her about Sarah, their meeting, their marriage, the years of joy and struggle, an ordinary happiness that had seemed so mundane at the time and now felt like treasure. At some point, Victoria fell asleep with his head on his shoulder. Marcus lay awake a while longer, watching the city lights play across the ceiling, feeling the warmth of another person beside him for the first time in 3 years. He thought about everything that had led to this moment: the storm, the crash, the strange sequence of events that had brought Victoria Sterling into his life. He was not a man who believed in fate or destiny, but he could not deny that something larger than coincidence seemed to be at work. When he finally drifted off to sleep, he dreamed of Sarah. She was standing in the kitchen of their old house, sunlight streaming through the window, her red hair glowing like fire. She was smiling at him, that smile he had fallen in love with 30 years ago, the smile that had sustained him through deployments and difficulties and all the trials of a long marriage. In the dream, she spoke, "It's okay, Marcus. You can let go now. You don't have to hold on so tight anymore." He woke up with tears on his face and Victoria's hand in his. The next morning, Marcus slipped out early, leaving Victoria sleeping peacefully in her enormous bed. He had promised Emma he would make her breakfast, and even the extraordinary events of the past few weeks could not change the fact that his daughter came first. He drove through the awakening city, watching the sun rise over the Portland skyline. Everything looked different this morning, brighter somehow, more full of possibility. At home, he made pancakes while Emma sat at the kitchen table, chattering about school and friends and the YouTube videos she wanted to show him. Normal things, ordinary things, the fabric of a life. But as he flipped pancakes and listened to his daughter talk, Marcus found his mind returning again and again to the evidence bag sitting in his closet. The device someone had used to try to kill Victoria. The mystery that still needed solving. Richard Sterling had motive, opportunity, and apparently the technical knowledge to pull off such an attack. But something about the way he had reacted at dinner bothered Marcus, the smooth denial, yes, but also a flash of something that looked almost like genuine surprise when Victoria mentioned the device. Either Richard was a better actor than Marcus gave him credit for, or someone else was involved. He needed more information, more evidence, something that would either confirm Richard's guilt or point him toward the real culprit. After dropping Em at school, Marcus drove to a coffee shop near the Sterling Industries headquarters. He had a plan, crude perhaps, but effective. He was going to watch. Wait. See who came and went from the building, see if anyone acted suspicious. It was old-fashioned surveillance, the kind he had learned in the Navy when electronic methods failed. Sometimes the best intelligence came from simply keeping your eyes open. He ordered a coffee and settled into a window seat with a clear view of the building's entrance. For 3 hours, he watched employees stream in and out, delivery trucks pull up to the loading dock, executives emerge for lunch meetings, and return with briefcases full of documents. Then he saw something interesting. A man emerged from a side entrance, not the main lobby, but a service door that led to the parking garage. He was dressed in a maintenance uniform, carrying a toolbox, his cap pulled low over his face. There was nothing obviously suspicious about him, just another worker going about his business. But something about the way he moved caught Marcus's attention, furtive, alert, checking over his shoulder every few seconds. Marcus pulled out his phone and snapped several photos as the man climbed into an unmarked white van and drove away. It was probably nothing, but 20 years in the Navy had taught Marcus to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. He called Victoria. "I need access to your company's personnel records, specifically anyone working in vehicle maintenance or the executive garage." There was a pause. "That's going to raise some flags." "Why?" He told her about the man he had seen, the suspicious behavior, the van with no markings. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, "I can get you the records, but Marcus, be careful. If Richard is behind this, he has resources, dangerous resources. I spent 20 years in the United States Navy. I've dealt with dangerous resources before. This is different. This is my family. That doesn't make them less dangerous. It makes them more." Another pause. "You're right. I'll have the files sent to you this afternoon." And Marcus, "Yeah, thank you for believing me, for fighting for me." The words hit him harder than he expected. Fighting for someone, not just helping them, not just supporting them, but actively fighting for them was something he had not done since Sarah's illness. He had forgotten how it felt. "I'll call you when I find something." He hung up and went back to watching the building, but his mind was elsewhere. On Victoria, on the family that had tried to kill her, on the tangled web of money and power and resentment that had nearly claimed her life, and on his own heart, which was slowly terrifyingly beginning to open again. The files arrived that evening via secure email. Victoria had been thorough personnel records for everyone in the vehicle maintenance department, security logs for the executive garage, even surveillance footage from the weeks leading up to her accident. Marcus spent the night going through it all, cross-referencing names and dates, looking for anomalies. Emma had gone to bed hours ago, and the house was quiet except for the hum of his ancient laptop and the occasional creak of settling wood. By 2 a.m, he had found it, a name Derek Morrison, hired 6 months ago as a maintenance technician in the executive garage. According to his personnel file, he had excellent references and a clean background. But when Marcus dug deeper, the story fell apart. The references were fake. The companies Morrison claimed to have worked for either did not exist or had no record of his employment. His social security number belonged to a man who had died in 2019. Derek Morrison was a ghost, a fake identity created for the sole purpose of gaining access to Victoria's car. Marcus checked the surveillance footage for the day before the accident. There he was, Morrison, or whatever his real name was, spending 45 minutes in the garage, ostensibly performing routine maintenance. The camera angle did not show exactly what he was doing, but Marcus could guess. He was installing the override device. The question was, who had hired him? Marcus needed to find Derek Morrison. And he had a feeling that whoever Morrison really was, he was the key to unraveling this entire conspiracy. He saved his notes, backed up the files, and finally allowed himself to sleep. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin. But as he drifted off, one thought kept circling through his mind. Victoria Sterling had walked into his life 2 weeks ago, a stranger in need of help. Now he was investigating a murder attempt, challenging a family of billionaires, and falling for a woman who lived in a completely different world. His life would never be the same. He knew that now. The question was whether that was a blessing or a curse. In a dingy apartment across town, a man sat in the darkness watching the news on a small television. Victoria Sterling's face filled the screen, her voice confident as she announced the launch of the Callahan Fund. The man lit a cigarette, inhaled deeply, and let the smoke curl toward the water-stained ceiling. He had failed. The car crash was supposed to look like an accident, but the target had survived. Worse, someone had found the device. The operation was compromised. His employer would not be happy. His employer was never happy when plans went wrong. The man pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number he had memorized. A voice answered, cold-clipped, accustomed to giving orders. Is it done? There were complications. She survived. Someone pulled her from the wreck before the fire could finish the job. A long silence. When the voice spoke again, it was sharp with anger. Who? Some nobody. A handyman. He found the device too. Then we have a problem. What do you want me to do? Another silence, longer this time. The man could almost hear the calculations being made, the risks being weighed. Nothing for now. Let the situation develop. If the handyman becomes a problem, I know what to do. Good. Stay close. This isn't over. The line went dead. The man crushed out his cigarette and turned back to the television. Victoria Sterling was smiling now, standing next to a tall man with calloused hands and honest eyes. The handyman. He memorized the face, filed it away for future reference. Marcus Callahan, former Navy, single father, a man with nothing to lose and everything to protect. If it came to it, the handyman would be dealt with. But for now, he would watch and wait and be ready when the call came, because in this business, the call always came. And when it did, Marcus Callahan would learn that some problems could not be solved with wrenches and wire cutters. Some problems required more permanent solutions. The morning after his late-night research session, Marcus woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Emma singing in the kitchen. It was a sound he had not heard in months, his daughter's voice clear and sweet, rising and falling with a pop song from the radio. He lay in bed for a moment, savoring it. This was what mattered. This was why he kept fighting. Not for money or recognition or revenge, but for moments like this one, ordinary, precious, irreplaceable. Then his phone buzzes, a text from Victoria. Found something. Can you meet me at the office noon? Marcus hauled himself out of bed, showered and dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt. Emma looked up from her cereal as he entered the kitchen. You look nice, Dad. Hot date. He raised an eyebrow. Where did you learn to talk like that? School, also YouTube. She grinned, showing off the braces she had gotten last month. Is it with Victoria? It's not a date. It's work. Uh-huh. The skepticism in her voice was pure preteen attitude. Marcus kissed the top of her head. Be good at school. I'll pick you up at 3. He drove to Sterling Industries headquarters, a sleek tower of glass and steel in downtown Portland. The lobby was all marble floors and abstract art, the kind of corporate opulence designed to intimidate visitors. Marcus felt the weight of it as he approached the reception desk, acutely aware of his work boots and calloused hands. Marcus Callahan here to see Victoria Sterling. The receptionist, a young woman with a practiced smile, typed something into her computer. One moment, please. A pause. Ms. Sterling is expecting you. Take the private elevator to the 40th floor. The private elevator, of course. The ride up was smooth and silent, the kind of elevator that costs more than most people's houses. When the doors opened, Victoria was waiting. She looked tired, Marcus noticed. Dark circles under her eyes, tension in her shoulders. But she smiled when she saw him, and some of that tension seemed to ease. Thank you for coming. You said you found something. She led him through a series of offices, glass walls, modern furniture, employees who glanced up curiously as they passed until they reached a conference room. Inside, a small team of people sat around a table covered with documents and laptops. My private security team, Victoria explained. After you sent me your findings last night, I asked them to dig deeper. She nodded to a woman at the head of the table, mid-40s, sharp-eyed with the bearing of someone who had seen combat. Rachel Chen, head of corporate security. Rachel, tell Marcus what you found. Rachel stood and pulled up a series of images on a wall-mounted screen. Derek Morrison, real name Michael Torres, former military contractor specializing in electronic warfare and vehicle modification. He's been linked to 3 other accidents over the past decade, wealthy targets, all ruled accidental or unsolved. Marcus studied the face on the screen. It was the man he had seen leaving the building yesterday, the one with the furtive movements and the unmarked van. He's a professional. The best money can buy. Rachel clicked to another slide, a web of financial transactions highlighted and annotated. We traced the payments for his recent work. They came from a shell company in the Caymans, but we managed to follow the trail back to its source. She clicked again. A name appeared on the screen, Sterling Family Trust. Marcus looked at Victoria. Her face had gone pale, but her jaw was set with determination. The trust is controlled by Eleanor, she said quietly. She has sole authority over disbursements. So your stepmother hired a professional killer to murder you. It looks that way. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Marcus had suspected Richard, but Eleanor, the elegant socialite with the diamonds, in the disdain, Eleanor was the mastermind. What do you want to do? Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the pain underneath. I want to destroy her. I want to take everything she has, her money, her status, her son's precious shares of my company, and leave her with nothing. I want her to know what it feels like to lose everything. She turned to face him. But first, I want to know why. I want to look her in the eye and ask her why she hated me enough to try to kill me. Marcus nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. Victoria reached out and took his hand. Together. Together. The meeting with Eleanor was arranged for the following evening at the Sterling estate. This time Marcus knew what he was walking into. This time he was prepared. He spent the day gathering evidence, working with Rachel Chen to build an airtight case. Financial records, surveillance footage, Torres's history, everything was documented, copied, secured in multiple locations. If anything happened to him or Victoria, the truth would come out. Emma sensed something was wrong when he picked her up from school. Dad, are you okay? You look serious. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just dealing with some grown-up stuff. Is it about Victoria? He hesitated. Emma was 12 years old enough to notice things, young enough that he wanted to protect her from the uglier parts of the world. Yeah, it's about Victoria, but it's going to be okay, I promise. Emma studied him with those sharp blue eyes, Sarah's eyes. He thought Sarah's insight packed into a 12-year-old package. I like her dad, Victoria. I think she's good for you. You do. You smile more when she's around, and you stop drinking coffee like it was medicine. Marcus blinked. He had not realized his daughter had been watching so closely. When did you get so observant? I've always been observant. You just didn't notice because you were too busy worrying about everything. She grinned. It's okay, Dad. I forgive you. He pulled her into a hug, holding on tight. This was his priority. This girl, this life, this future. Everything else was just details. I love you, Emma. I love you too, Dad. Now can we get pizza? I'm starving. That evening, Marcus and Victoria drove to the Sterling estate together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for a moment the world seemed almost peaceful. Victoria was quiet, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Are you ready for this? She nodded, not looking at him. I've been waiting for this my whole life. A chance to confront her, to make her answer for everything she's done. What if she doesn't have the answers you want? Then at least I'll have the truth. That's more than I've ever had before. They pulled up to the estate as darkness fell. The mansion was lit from within, warm light spilling from the windows onto the manicured lawn. It looked almost welcoming, a cruel joke given what they were about to do. Inside, Eleanor was waiting in the formal sitting room. She was alone. Richard apparently had been excluded from this meeting. She sat in a high-backed chair, perfectly composed, a cup of tea steaming on the table beside her. Victoria and Mr. Callahan. Her voice was ice. I assume this isn't a social call. Victoria did not sit. She stood in the center of the room, Marcus beside her, and pulled a folder from her bag. I know what you did, Eleanor. She dropped the folder on the table. It fell open, revealing photos, documents, financial records, the entire case laid bare. Eleanor did not flinch. She picked up the folder, leafed through its contents with an expression of mild curiosity and set it down again. Impressive, you've been busy. You hired Michael Torres to kill me. You used the Sterling Family Trust to pay him. You thought no one would ever find out. And yet here you are. Eleanor's smile was thin, humorless. I always knew you were clever, Victoria. I just didn't realize how clever. Why? Victoria's voice cracked just slightly. Why did you want me dead, the company, the money? What could possibly be worth murdering you? Eleanor laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Oh, Victoria, you still don't understand, do you? This was never about money. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. She stood, moving to the window, her back to them. This was about justice, about righting a wrong that happened 40 years ago. What wrong? Eleanor turned. For the first time, Marcus saw something human in her eyes, something twisted and broken, but human nonetheless. Your father, William Sterling, the great man, the visionary, the titan of industry. Her voice dripped with bitterness. Do you know how we met? I was his secretary. Young, naive, hopelessly in love. He seduced me, promised me the world, and then when I got pregnant with Richard, he threw me away like garbage. Victoria stood very still. He married you. Eventually, after 15 years of fighting, after I threatened to go public with everything I knew about his business practices, he married me to keep me quiet, not because he loved me. Eleanor's hands were shaking now. And the whole time, do you know what he talked about? You, his precious first daughter, the child he abandoned to foster care but never stopped thinking about. I was in foster care because of you, because of him. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. I gave him an ultimatum, me or the child. He chose me, but he never forgave himself for it, and he never forgave me. Every day of our marriage, I saw it in his eyes, the regret, the longing, the wish that you were there instead of me. She laughed again, more bitterly than before. When he died, I thought I would finally be free. But then you came back, crawled out of whatever hole you'd been living in, and claimed what was mine, what was Richard's, what we had earned through years of humiliation and suffering. So you decided to kill me. I decided to correct a mistake. William should have let you die in that foster home. If he had, none of this would have happened. Richard would run the company, I would have my peace, and the Sterling name would finally be free of your shadow. The room was silent. Marcus watched Victoria process this information, the truth she had been seeking her whole life, delivered in the cruelest possible way. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. You're insane. I'm practical. Eleanor returned to her chair, her composure restored. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Go to the police. I have lawyers who will tie this case up for years. Destroy my reputation. I stopped caring about that long ago. Kill me, she smiled. You don't have it in you. Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I already have what I need. She pressed a button and Eleanor's voice filled the room, the confession recorded in perfect clarity. This was about justice, about righting a wrong. I decided to correct a mistake. I have lawyers who will tie this case up for years. Eleanor's face went white. You recorded me. Modern phones are wonderful things. Victoria pocketed the device. I'm not going to kill you, Eleanor. I'm not going to destroy your reputation. I'm going to do something much worse. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm going to let you live in a small apartment with a modest allowance watching from a distance as I take everything you built and give it away to people who actually deserve it. Every charity event, every foundation launch, every act of kindness I perform will be a reminder of what you lost and why. She straightened. Your lawyers can fight the criminal charges, but the civil case, the one I'll file tomorrow claiming all assets obtained through the Sterling Family Trust under fraudulent pretenses, that will take everything. Your house, your jewelry, your son's shares in my company. Everything. Eleanor stared at her speechless for the first time. Goodbye, Eleanor. I'd say it's been a pleasure, but we both know that would be a lie. Victoria turned and walked out of the room. Marcus followed, pausing at the door to look back at the woman who had tried to kill the person he was beginning to love. Eleanor sat in her expensive chair in her expensive room, surrounded by expensive things that would soon belong to someone else. She looked old suddenly, old and defeated. Marcus felt no sympathy. Some wounds were too deep to forgive. Outside, the night air was cool and fresh. Victoria stood by the car, her arms wrapped around herself, trembling slightly. It's over. Marcus put his arm around her. How do you feel? I don't know. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solidity. Empty, relieved, yin, all of it at once. That's normal. You just confronted someone who tried to kill you. It's going to take time to process. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. Thank you for being here, for believing me, for fighting for me. Always. The word came out before he could stop it, but once it was spoken, he found he did not want to take it back. Victoria rose on her toes and kissed him. Not a passionate kiss, not a desperate one. A gentle kiss, soft and sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they parted, she was smiling. Take me home, Marcus Callahan. He opened the car door for her. Which home? Yours. She slid into the seat. If that's okay. Marcus walked around to the driver's side, his heart hammering in his chest. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he had made. Don't close off your heart. You deserve to be happy. Yeah, he said as he started the engine. That's okay. They drove through the night, leaving the Sterling estate and everything it represented behind them. Ahead lay an uncertain future, legal battles, media attention, the long, slow process of building something new from the ashes of the old. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Callahan was not afraid of the future. He was looking forward to it, because somewhere along the way, without quite knowing how it happened, he had found his way back to life, and he was not alone anymore. The weeks following Eleanor's confession passed in a blur of legal proceedings and media attention. Victoria's lawyers moved swiftly, filing civil suits that froze the Sterling Family Trust assets and initiated proceedings to strip Richard of his minority shares. The criminal case against Eleanor was slower, tangled in the web of high-priced attorneys she had predicted, but the recording Victoria had made proved difficult to dismiss. Marcus found himself caught in the crossfire of a world he had never asked to enter. Reporters camped outside his house, shouting questions whenever he emerged. His phone rang constantly, with calls from journalists, talk show producers, and literary agents who wanted to tell his story. He ignored them all, focusing instead on what mattered: Emma, his work, and the woman who had become an unexpected anchor in his life. Victoria stayed at his house more often than not. She slept in his bed while he took the couch, maintaining a boundary that neither of them was quite ready to cross. But the intimacy between them grew in other ways: shared meals, long conversations, quiet evenings watching Emma do her homework, while the television murmured in the background. 1 month after the confrontation at the Sterling estate, the Callahan Fund held its official launch. The Portland Convention Center blazed with light. Press crowded the hallways, cameras and microphones bristling like weapons. Marcus stood backstage feeling impossibly out of place in a suit that Victoria had insisted on buying him. The fabric was soft, expensive, nothing like the worn wool of his father's suit that he had worn to Eleanor's house. He tugged at the collar, trying to find room to breathe. Emma sat beside him, pretty in a blue dress that matched her eyes, her legs swinging with barely contained excitement. "Dad, are you nervous?" Marcus managed a tight smile. "What gave it away?" "Your face looks like you're about to throw up." She grinned, showing off her braces. "Don't worry, you're going to be great." A production assistant rushed toward them, tablet in hand, headset askew. "Mr. Callahan, you're on stage in 5 minutes." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "I thought I was just attending." "Miss Sterling wants you to speak." The assistant was already moving away. "She didn't tell you." Marcus took a deep breath, then another. 20 years in the Navy, 2 combat deployments. Sarah's funeral, where he had somehow found words to say goodbye to the love of his life. He could do this. He had to do this. The auditorium lights dimmed, music swelled, the crowd fell silent with the anticipation of people who had paid good money to be impressed. Victoria stepped onto the stage, commanding and beautiful, in a black dress that probably cost more than his truck. But when she spoke, her voice carried a warmth that had been absent in their first encounters. "Thank you all for being here tonight. We're launching something special, something deeply personal to me. The Callahan Fund." Applause rolled through the hall like thunder. "This fund exists because of one man, a man who saved my life without asking for anything in return. A man who reminded me that true strength isn't measured by wealth or power, but by character." She turned toward the wings, her gaze finding his in the darkness. "Marcus Callahan, please join me." His legs felt wooden as he walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding hot, turning the audience into a sea of shadows. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, weighing him, judging him. Victoria handed him the microphone, her fingers brushing his. "Speak from the heart," she whispered. Marcus looked out at the crowd. Somewhere in that darkness, Emma was watching, believing in him, counting on him. He cleared his throat. "I'm not much for speeches." His voice came out rough, uncertain. "I fix things for a living. Pipes, wires, engines. That's what I know. That's what I'm good at." He paused, gathering himself. "But being a single father taught me something important. You don't need money to be rich. You need people who believe in you. You need moments that remind you why you keep going." He glanced at Victoria, drawing strength from her steady presence. "The night I pulled Ms. Sterling from that burning car, I wasn't thinking about recognition or reward. I was thinking about my daughter waiting for me at home, about the promise I made to my wife before she died, that I would always do the right thing no matter how hard it got." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. "The Callahan Fund isn't about me. It's about every parent who works 2 jobs and still can't make rent. Every father who stays up all night worrying about how to pay for braces or birthday parties. Every mother who skips meals so her kids can eat." His voice grew stronger, more confident. "You matter. Your struggles matter. And now, thanks to Victoria Sterling, you have support. Real support, not charity dignity." The room exploded in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Marcus stood frozen, overwhelmed by a feeling he couldn't name. Victoria took his hand, squeezing tightly. "Perfect," she murmured. After the ceremony, they found a quiet moment in a corridor behind the main hall. The sounds of the reception, clinking glasses, polite laughter, the murmur of expensive small talk filtered through the walls. Victoria leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "You were amazing out there." "I was terrified. That's what made it real." She looked up at him, her eyes soft in the dim light. "Most people in that room have never been terrified of anything except losing money. You reminded them that there are things more important than their portfolios." Marcus stroked her hair, marveling at how natural this felt. A month ago, she had been a stranger bleeding in his truck. Now she was the first person he thought about when he woke up and the last person on his mind before sleep. "I have something for you," Victoria said, reaching into her clutch. She pulled out a small velvet box. Marcus's heart stuttered. "Victoria, open it." Inside was a pen, elegant silver engraved with words that made his throat tighten, "For the man who cannot be bought." "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep fighting with me." She took his face in her hands. Say you'll help me build something that matters. He kissed her, then gentle and deep, pouring into it everything he couldn't find words for. When they parted, both were slightly breathless. I'll fight, he said, as long as you need me. The photographer who had been lurking nearby chose that moment to snap a picture. The flash caught them mid-embrace, faces close, the pen box still open in Marcus's hand. Neither of them noticed. They should have. The photograph appeared on every news site the next morning. The headlines ranged from breathless to vicious. Billionaire CEO finds love with blue-collar hero. Sterling savior romance or publicity stunt. From handyman to boyfriend, the suspicious rise of Marcus Callahan. Marcus scrolled through the articles on his phone, his coffee growing cold beside him. Each headline was worse than the last. Each comment section was a cesspool of speculation and cruelty. Obviously, he's after her money. She probably staged the whole accident for publicity. Bet he's sleeping in silk sheets now instead of that dump he calls a house. The words shouldn't have hurt. He knew who he was, knew the truth of what had happened. But seeing his character assassinated by strangers who had never met him, that left a mark. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. I'm handling it. Don't read the comments. Too late. At school, Emma faced her own ordeal. Marcus was in his truck waiting to pick her up when she came running across the parking lot. Her face was red, her eyes puffy from crying. She yanked open the door and threw herself into the seat, refusing to look at him. Emma, what happened? Nothing. Her voice was thick, trembling. Just drive. He drove. For 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, at a red light, Emma's composure cracked. They said you were a gold digger. The words came out in a rush mixed with sobs. They said Victoria paid you to pretend to save her. They said Mom would be ashamed of you. Marcus pulled over to the side of the road, his hands shaking on the wheel. Who said this? Kids at school. They saw it on their parents' phones. Everyone was laughing and pointing, and she dissolved into tears, her whole body shaking. Marcus gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her as tightly as he could in the cramped cab of the truck. He felt her pain like it was his own worse than his own, because he would take any amount of cruelty directed at himself if it meant sparing her. Listen to me. His voice was rough with emotion. Your mother would never be ashamed of me. She knew who I was. She loved who I was. And nothing anyone says can change that. But they keep saying, people say a lot of things they don't mean and don't understand. The truth is, I saved Victoria because she needed help. That's all. Everything else, the fun, the house, whatever they think is happening between us, that's just people trying to make a story where there isn't one. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. Do you love her? The question hit him like a punch. Did he love Victoria? He cared about her, certainly. He wanted to protect her, to make her smile, to be there when she needed someone. Was that love or was it something else? Gratitude, attraction, the simple human need for connection after years of loneliness. I don't know, he said honestly. I know I care about her. I know she makes me feel things I haven't felt in a long time. But love, he shook his head. That's a big word, Emma. I'm not ready to use it yet. Emma nodded slowly, processing this. Okay. But Dad, yeah. If you do love, why, it's okay. Mom would want you to be happy. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. This 12-year-old girl dealing with her own pain was still trying to take care of him. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just didn't notice because you were too busy being sad. He laughed despite himself, a wet, broken sound. Come on, let's go home. But home offered no refuge. That evening, while Emma did her homework and Marcus tried to focus on fixing a leaky faucet, his phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Marcus, I need you to come to the office now. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it got when she was trying not to fall apart. What's wrong? Richard, he's making a move. The board is meeting tomorrow and he's calling for a vote of no confidence. He says the scandal is damaging the company, that my personal indiscretions are affecting stock prices. That's ridiculous. It doesn't matter if it's ridiculous. It matters if the board believes it. And right now, half of them are wavering. Marcus looked at Emma bent over her algebra textbook, her brow furrowed in concentration. He thought about what this fight was costing them, not just him, but his daughter who was paying a price she had never asked to pay. I'll be there in an hour. The Sterling Industries boardroom was a cathedral of corporate power, long mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Portland skyline. Victoria sat at the head of the table, flanked by lawyers and advisors, her face a mask of composure that Marcus recognized as barely controlled fury. Richard Sterling stood at the opposite end, smug and polished, enjoying his moment. "The facts are simple," Richard was saying. "In the past month, our stock has dropped 8%. Media coverage has shifted from our products to my sister's personal life, and the so-called hero she's parading around has become a liability rather than an asset." He gestured at a screen showing headlines, photos, the worst of the social media attacks. Marcus saw his own face staring back at him, twisted by unflattering angles and vicious captions. "The board has a responsibility to shareholders. If Victoria's judgment is compromised, my judgment is fine." Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The stock dropped because of the supply chain issues you created, Richard. The media coverage is a result of a failed assassination attempt that you may very well have been complicit in." The room went silent. "That's a serious accusation." Richard's smile didn't waver. "Do you have proof?" Mother confessed. "I have it on recording. A recording that any competent lawyer will argue was obtained under duress and is therefore inadmissible." Richard shrugged. "Face it, Victoria. You're losing. The board is losing confidence. And your blue-collar boyfriend is making everything worse." Marcus stepped forward. He hadn't planned to speak, had planned to stay silent, let Victoria handle her own battles. But something about Richard's smug certainty made him snap. "You want to talk about making things worse?" His voice was quiet, controlled, dangerous. "Let's talk about the device I found in Victoria's car. Let's talk about Michael Torres, the professional assassin your mother hired. Let's talk about the shell company in the Caymans that funneled the payments." Richard's smile flickered just for a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." Marcus moved closer, his presence filling the space in a way that made the corporate executive shift uncomfortably. "I spent 20 years in the United States Navy. I've seen men like you before. Men who think money makes them untouchable. Men who believe they can do whatever they want because the rules don't apply to them." He stopped directly in front of Richard, close enough to see the sweat beading on the younger man's forehead. "I'm not impressed by your suits or your stock prices. I'm not intimidated by your lawyers or your boardroom games, and I'm not going anywhere." Richard's composure cracked. "You're nothing, a handyman, a nobody. You think you can threaten me? I'm not threatening you." Marcus's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm telling you what's going to happen. Your mother is going to prison. Her assets are going to be seized. And when the investigation uncovers your involvement, and it will, you're going to join her. You have no evidence. I have the device. I have Torres's records. I have a very motivated team of investigators who are very interested in tracing every payment you've ever made." Marcus smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Tick-tock, Richard." The board meeting ended without a vote. Richard stormed out, his confidence shattered. Victoria's position for the moment was secure. But Marcus knew this wasn't over. Men like Richard didn't give up. They regrouped, found new angles, struck when you least expected it. That night, alone in his house while Emma slept, Marcus made a decision. He packed a bag, quietly, carefully moving through the darkness like the ghost he sometimes felt he had become. Clothes, tools, a few of Emma's things. Enough to start over somewhere else, somewhere far from Victoria Sterling and her world of money and power and danger. He was zipping the bag closed when Emma's voice stopped him cold. "What are you doing?" She stood in the doorway, wrapped in her bathrobe, her face pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Emma, go back to bed. You're leaving." It wasn't a question. "You're running away." "I'm protecting you, protecting us. This life, Victoria's life, it's not safe. People are trying to hurt her, and as long as we're connected to her, they could hurt us too." "So you're just going to abandon her?" Emma's voice rose, trembling with anger and hurt. "Like everyone else in her life, like her father abandoned her." Marcus flinched. "It's not the same." "It's exactly the same." Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "She told me, Dad, about the foster homes, about being alone, about everyone leaving her, And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to prove that she was right not to trust anyone. Emma, Mom told me something before she died. Emma's voice broke. She said, don't let Daddy close his heart. There are still good things in the world. Victoria is a good thing, Dad, and you're closing your heart, just like Mom was afraid you would. Marcus dropped the bag. His legs gave out and he sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. I'm scared, he admitted. The words felt like surrender. I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of failing you. I'm scared of loving someone again and having them taken away. Emma sat beside him, small and fierce, her hand on his shoulder. Mom wasn't taken away, Dad. She got sick. It wasn't fair, but it wasn't anyone's fault. And being scared doesn't mean you get to give up. When did you become the parent? Someone had to. She managed a watery smile. Now put that bag away and go talk to Victoria. She needs you. Marcus looked at his daughter, this incredible, brave, wise young woman who had somehow grown up while he wasn't paying attention. I love you, Emma. I know. Now go. Victoria's penthouse was dark when Marcus arrived. He used the key she had given him, letting himself into the vast, silent space. The city glittered beyond the windows, indifferent to the human dramas playing out in its shadow. He found her in the bedroom, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. Her makeup was smeared, her clothes disheveled. She looked nothing like the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and built empires. She looked broken. Victoria. She looked up and the raw pain in her eyes made his chest ache. You came. I'm sorry. He sat beside her close enough to touch, but not quite touching. I almost did something stupid. I almost ran away. I wouldn't have blamed you. Her voice was hollow. Everyone leaves eventually. It's what I know. It's what I expect. Emma stopped me. She reminded me of a promise I made to her mother. Victoria was quiet for a moment. What promise? That I wouldn't close my heart, that I would let myself be happy. He reached out and took her hand. I've been scared, Victoria. Scared of losing you the way I lost Sarah. Scared that loving you would mean betraying her memory. But Emma made me realize something. What? Sarah would have liked you. She would have seen what I see, a woman who's been hurt, who's been betrayed, who's built walls around herself to survive. And she would have told me the same thing Emma told me tonight. Victoria's hand tightened around his. What did Emma tell you? That you're worth fighting for. He lifted her chin, making her meet his eyes. That love isn't about being safe. It's about being brave. And that the only way to honor Sarah's memory is to keep living, keep loving, keep choosing our hope over fear. Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in. Everyone I've ever trusted has hurt me. Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. One mistake at a time. One moment of terrifying, wonderful vulnerability at a time. She laughed through her tears, a broken sound that somehow carried hope. You make it sound simple. Simple isn't the same as easy. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around Hero. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. They sat together on the floor of her penthouse, holding each other as the night deepened around them. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, indifferent to the small, profound miracle happening in their midst. Two people wounded and wary, choosing to trust again. Two hearts scarred by loss, learning to beat in rhythm. It was not a perfect moment. The world outside still seethed with scandal and danger. Eleanor was still fighting her legal battles. Richard was still scheming. The media was still hungry for blood. But in that room, in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the warmth of another person, the steady beat of a heart, the whispered promise that tomorrow would be faced together. Marcus pressed his lips to Victoria's forehead. I need to tell you something. What? Your letter, the one you wrote asking me to marry you. She went very still. You never answered. I'm answering now. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with emotion. Yes, 1,000,000 times yes. Victoria's breath caught. You mean it? I've never meant anything more in my life. She kissed him, and not gently, not carefully, but with the fierce desperation of someone who had finally found what she had been searching for her whole life. When they parted, both were trembling. We're really doing this, she whispered. We're really doing this. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over Portland, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. A new day, a new beginning. And for the first time in years, Marcus Callahan looked at the future without fear. The morning after their reconciliation, Victoria called a press conference. Marcus learned about it the same way the rest of the world did, through a breaking news alert on his phone. He was making breakfast for Emma, flipping pancakes on the old griddle Sarah had bought at a garage sale 15 years ago, when the notification buzzed. Sterling CEO to address media at 10 a.m. Major announcement expected. He stared at the screen, a cold knot forming in his stomach. Victoria had not mentioned anything about a press conference. After last night, after everything they had shared, everything they had promised, she was making major announcements without telling him first. His phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. Before you say anything, I know I should have told you. Her voice was rushed, breathless with nervous energy. But I needed to do this before I lost my nerve. Marcus, I need you to be there at the press conference. Please. What are you planning? Trust me. 2 words. Simple, terrifying, loaded with everything that had passed between them. I'll be there. The Sterling Industries lobby was chaos when Marcus arrived. Reporters jostled for position, cameras bristled like weapons. The air hummed with anticipation and speculation. Security guards formed a human barrier around the makeshift podium, their faces impassive as they scanned the crowd. Marcus pushed through the throng, ignoring the shouts of recognition from journalists who had made his face famous against his will. He found a spot near the front where Victoria could see him and waited. She emerged from the elevator at exactly 10 o'clock. Black suit hair pulled back, the armor of the CEO firmly in place. But when her eyes found his in the crowd, something softened, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the steel. Thank you all for coming. Her voice carried easily over the murmur of the crowd, amplified by the microphones clustered on the podium. Over the past weeks, there has been considerable speculation about my personal life, about my relationship with Marcus Callahan, about whether our connection is genuine or manufactured. She paused, letting the tension build. Today, I want to address those questions directly. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for scandal or revelation or anything that would make tomorrow's headlines. Marcus Callahan saved my life. That fact is not in dispute. What has been disputed, what has been twisted and sensationalized and used to attack both of us is what happened afterward. Victoria stepped out from behind the podium, moving toward where Marcus stood. The cameras followed her, 100 lenses tracking her every step. The truth is simple. I fell in love with a man who wanted nothing from me. A man who refused my money, challenged my assumptions, and forced me to confront the walls I had built around myself. A man who taught me that real strength comes not from wealth or power, but from character. She stopped directly in front of Marcus. The crowd had gone silent, sensing that something momentous was about to happen. The truth is also this. Victoria reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She opened it to reveal a simple gold band, unadorned, unpretentious. Then in front of every camera and every reporter and every skeptic who had questioned the authenticity of their relationship, Victoria Sterling dropped to one knee. The gasp that went through the crowd was audible, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck all the air from the room. Marcus Callahan. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes never left his. You taught me that some things cannot be bought, that kindness is its own reward, that love is not a transaction, but a gift. She held up the ring, the gold catching the harsh light of the camera flashes. I am not asking because I owe you. I am asking because I cannot imagine my life without you, without Emma, without the family we have already begun to build. Marcus felt the world narrow to this moment, this woman kneeling before him, offering herself without reservation, stripping away every protection she had ever constructed. Will you marry me? The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Marcus reached down and took her hands, pulling her gently to her feet. You already asked me this last night. Victoria's smile was tremulous, uncertain. I wanted everyone to know. I wanted the world to see that this is real. It was always real. He took the ring from the box and slid it onto his own finger. A perfect fit, as if she had known his size without asking. Knowing Victoria, she probably had. Yes, his voice was rough with emotion. 1,000,000 times yes. Victoria threw her arms around him and he caught her, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that made the cameras go wild. The crowd erupted in applause and shouted questions and the clicking of 1,000 shutters. But Marcus heard none of it. All he heard was Victoria's voice in his ear whispering 3 words that meant more than any headline ever could. I love you. The wedding took place 3 months later in a small chapel on the outskirts of Portland. No media, no corporate executives, no society photographers or gossip columnists, or anyone who might turn their union into content. Just the people who mattered, a handful of friends, Victoria's most trusted employees, Marcus's fellow veterans from the Navy, and the families they had helped through the Callahan Fund. Emma stood at the altar between them, radiant, in a white dress with flowers woven through her braided hair. She held both their hands as the officiant spoke a physical bridge connecting the 2 halves of their new family. The vows they exchanged were simple and honest. No poetry, no grand gestures, just 2 people promising to face the future together, whatever it might bring. When the officiant pronounced them married, Emma was the first to cheer. The reception was held in the chapel's modest fellowship hall, folding tables covered with white cloths catering from a local restaurant, a playlist assembled by Emma from songs she insisted were not too embarrassing. It was nothing like the elaborate galas Victoria had attended throughout her career. It was perfect. Midway through the evening, Marcus found himself standing alone by the window watching his wife dance with his daughter. Victoria moved with surprising grace following Emma's enthusiastic lead in a dance that seemed to involve a lot of spinning and laughing. His wife. The word still felt strange in his mind, like a garment that did not quite fit. For so long, that word had belonged to Sarah alone. To use it for someone else felt like a betrayal, even though he knew had been told by Emma, by his own heart, by the memory of Sarah's voice on her last night, that it was not. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find an unexpected figure standing beside him. Eleanor Sterling. She looked different from the last time he had seen her, older, smaller, the diamond armor replaced by a simple black dress. The legal proceedings had taken their toll. Her assets were frozen, her reputation in tatters, her son facing his own investigation. She had been released on bail pending trial, stripped of everything that had once made her formidable. Marcus tensed his body, shifting instinctively into a defensive posture. What are you doing here? Victoria invited me. Eleanor's voice was quiet, stripped of its former venom. I was as surprised as you are. She didn't mention it. She wanted to see if I would come, if I was capable of... Eleanor paused, searching for words. Of being human, I suppose. They stood in silence for a moment, watching Victoria and Emma twirl across the dance floor. I hated her for so long. Eleanor's confession came out barely above a whisper. Hated what she represented. The child William never stopped loving, even after he abandoned her. The reminder of his guilt, his failure, his inability to be the man he pretended to be. Marcus said nothing. He was not going to make this easy for her. I convinced myself that removing her would be justice, that I was protecting Richard, protecting the family William should have prioritized. But the truth, her voice cracked. The truth is that I was jealous. Jealous of a little girl who had nothing, because even with nothing, she had more of William's love than I ever did. You tried to kill her. Yes. No excuses, no justifications. Just the bald admission. And I will spend whatever time I have left paying for that. The courts will see to it. But I needed to tell her that I understand now. What she accomplished, what she built, the person she became, despite everything, it was not because of William's love. It was in spite of its absence. She made herself. And that is something I could never do. Victoria appeared at Marcus's elbow, slightly breathless from dancing. Her eyes moved from her husband to her stepmother, assessing the situation with the quick intelligence that had built an empire. Eleanor. Victoria. The older woman reached into her small handbag and pulled out an object, a man's watch, old and worn, the crystal scratched with years of use. This belonged to William. He wore it every day until he died. I kept it because I thought, I don't know what I thought, that it meant something, that it connected me to him. She held it out to Victoria. It should have been yours from the beginning. His daughter, his heir, his greatest accomplishment, even if he was too cowardly to claim you. Victoria took the watch, slowly turning it over in her hands. Marcus could see the conflict in her face, the pain of old wounds, the anger that had sustained her for so long, and beneath it all, a flicker of something that might have been compassion. Thank you. The words were stiff, careful. This doesn't change what you did. I know. And I don't forgive you, not yet. Maybe not ever. I understand. Victoria closed her fingers around the watch. But you came. You admitted what you did. That's more than William ever managed. Eleanor nodded a jerky movement that might have been an attempt to hold back tears. Goodbye, Victoria. For what it's worth, you deserve better. From all of us. She turned and walked away. Her steps slow and unsteady, the weight of her choices visible in every movement. Marcus put his arm around Victoria. You okay? I don't know. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. I think I might be eventually, but right now I just want to dance with my husband. The words sent a warmth through his chest. I think that can be arranged. They joined Emma on the dance floor, the three of them moving together in an awkward, joyful tangle of limbs and laughter. The watch was tucked into Victoria's pocket, a piece of the past that no longer had the power to define her future. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in a very long time, everyone in that small chapel believed in happy endings. 5 years passed like a dream. Marcus stood in front of a building that had not existed 12 months ago, a sprawling complex of classrooms, workshops, and training facilities that bore his name in steel letters above the entrance. The Callahan Vocational School, established for veterans and single parents. He still could not quite believe it was real. The building, the students already filing through its doors, the future it represented, all of it felt like something from someone else's life. Someone more important, more accomplished, more deserving of having their name carved into stone. But Victoria had insisted, and when Victoria Sterling Callahan insisted on something, the universe generally complied. You're doing that thing again. Her voice came from behind him, warm with amusement. He turned to find his wife, approaching elegant in a simple blue dress, her dark hair touched now with the first threads of gray. The past 5 years had softened her in ways that had nothing to do with age. The sharp edges rounded, the defensive walls lowered. The CEO transformed into something more human. What thing, Pema? The thing where you look at something amazing and try to convince yourself you don't deserve it. Marcus laughed, shaking his head. Old habits. Terrible habits. She slipped her hand into his, interlacing their fingers. Come on, Emma's speech starts in 10 minutes and she'll never forgive us if we're late. The auditorium was packed with students, faculty, and dignitaries who had come to witness the school's first graduation ceremony. Marcus and Victoria found seats in the front row reserved for family as the lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd. Emma walked to the podium with the confidence of a young woman who had grown up watching her stepmother command boardrooms. At 17, she was no longer the little girl who had clutched a stuffed bear and worried about her father. She was brilliant, fierce, compassionate, a living testament to everything Marcus and Victoria had tried to teach her. 5 years ago, my life changed forever. Her voice rang clear through the auditorium, amplified but not diminished by the microphone. A stranger knocked on our door wearing my dad's shirt and drinking his coffee, and I thought she was the most glamorous person I had ever seen. I also thought she was completely out of her mind, but that's another story. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Marcus felt Victoria's hand tighten around his. Over the years, I learned that Victoria Sterling was not a stranger at all. She was the missing piece of our family, the mother I never knew I needed. The woman who taught me that strength means being vulnerable. That power means lifting others up, and that love, real love, means showing up every day, even when it's hard. Emma paused, her gaze finding her parents in the front row. But I also learned something from my father. Something that Victoria learned too, even though she'll never admit it. Victoria raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing at her lips. I learned that dignity has no price tag. That character cannot be bought or sold or faked. And that the measure of a person's worth has nothing to do with the size of their bank account or the title on their business card. Emma's voice grew stronger, more passionate. My father is a mechanic. He fixes things with his hands. For most of his life, he struggled to pay bills, to keep a roof over our heads, to give me opportunities he never had. And when a billionaire tried to give him money for saving her life, do you know what he did? She let the question hang in the air. He gave it back. He told her that he didn't do it for money, that kindness wasn't something you could put a price on, that being a decent human being was its own reward. The auditorium was silent, every person hanging on her words. That moment changed Victoria's life. It changed our family's life. And through the work of the Callahan Fund, and now this school, it has changed thousands of other lives too. Emma gestured at the graduates seated behind her veteran single parents, people who had been given a second chance to build futures for themselves and their families. Every person in this room is proof that dignity matters, that hard work matters, that the content of your character matters more than the contents of your wallet. She looked directly at her father, her eyes bright with emotion. Dad, you taught me that a real man isn't measured by the money in his bank account. He's measured by what he leaves behind, the people he helps, the lives he touches, the love he gives without expecting anything in return. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He did not try to hide them. So on behalf of everyone in this room, everyone whose life has been changed by the Callahan Fund, everyone who has walked through the doors of this school seeking a better future, thank you. Thank you for being the man you are. Thank you for teaching us what real strength looks like. Emma stepped back from the podium as the auditorium erupted in applause. Standing ovation cameras flashing, the thunder of hundreds of hands clapping in unison. But Marcus barely noticed. He was on his feet, pushing through the crowd toward the stage, climbing the steps and gathering his daughter into his arms. I love you, Dad. Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. Victoria joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. For a long moment, the three of them stood together on that stage, a family forged from tragedy and rebuilt through love. When they finally parted, Emma was grinning through her tears. Was that too much? I practiced it like 100 times, but I wasn't sure if it was perfect. Victoria kissed her forehead. You are perfect. The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes and congratulations, of photographs and speeches, and the mingling of worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart. Marcus found himself talking to a veteran who had come through the school's program, a single father who reminded him of himself, tired, proud, determined to give his children something better. You changed my life, Mr. Callahan. The man's handshake was firm, calloused with honest work. For this program, I didn't know how I was going to make it. Now I've got a job, my kids are in good schools, and I can look them in the eye without being ashamed. Marcus thought about all the nights he had lain awake wondering the same things. You did the hard work. I just opened a door. That door made all the difference. Later, as the crowd thinned and the caterers began cleaning up, Marcus stood outside the school with Victoria and Emma. The sun was setting, painting the building's windows in shades of gold and amber. This is your legacy, Victoria said softly, leaning against his shoulder. Not the fund, not the school, not the buildings with your name on them. This. She gestured at the graduates streaming out to waiting cars, the families reuniting, the future's beginning. The lives you changed, the hope you gave, that's what will last. Marcus shook his head. This was never about me. It was about people helping each other. That's all it's ever been. Emma linked her arm through his. You know what Mom used to say before she died? Marcus felt his throat tighten. Even after all these years, the mention of Sarah could still bring tears to his eyes. What? She said that good things happen to people who deserve them, and that sometimes those good things take a while to show up. But they always come eventually for people who keep trying. He looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had grown up too fast, who had lost her mother and nearly lost her father, who had every reason to be bitter or angry or afraid. Instead, she was kind, generous, brave. Your mother was the wisest person I ever knew. I know, Emma grinned. That's why I'm so smart. Got it from her. Victoria laughed, pulling them both close. Come on, you two, let's go home. Home, such a simple word carrying so much weight. Home was no longer the small house with peeling paint and a crooked fence. Though they still owned it, maintained it, visited it regularly, because Emma insisted on keeping her childhood bedroom exactly as it was. Home was wherever the three of them were together. They walked to Marcus's old truck, still running, still reliable, a testament to the care he had lavished on it over the years. Victoria could have bought him a fleet of luxury vehicles, but he refused. Some things were not about money. Some things were about history and meaning, and the memories embedded in every scratch and dent. As they drove through the Portland streets, the city lights beginning to flicker on against the darkening sky, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here. The storm, the crash, the woman in his shirt drinking his coffee. The battles fought and won, the walls torn down, the love that had grown in the most unlikely of circumstances. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, her hand resting on his knee. "The night we met. How strange it was. How impossible it seemed that anything could come of it." And now, Marcus glanced at Emma, in the rearview mirror, scrolling through her phone at the city glittering beyond the windows. "Now I think that maybe nothing is impossible. Maybe the universe knows what it's doing even when we can't see the plan." Victoria smiled, that soft expression that still made his heart skip after 5 years of marriage. "Getting philosophical in your old age. Getting grateful." He reached over and took her hand. "For you, for Emma, for this life I never expected and don't deserve. You deserve everything, Marcus Callahan. When are you going to believe that? Maybe someday." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "For now, I'll just keep working on it." They pulled up to the house they now shared, a modest craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, nothing like the Sterling estate or Victoria's old penthouse. It was Emma's choice, made when she was 12 years old, standing in front of 3 different properties and declaring that this one felt like a real home. She had been right, as she so often was. Inside, they shed their formal clothes and gathered in the kitchen, Marcus making dinner, Victoria setting the table, Emma regaling them with stories about her classmates and their reactions to her speech. The ordinariness of it all was its own kind of miracle. After dinner, they sat together on the back porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The crickets sang their endless song. A neighbor's bite barked in the distance. The world continued its slow rotation, indifferent to the small dramas and triumphs of the people who walked its surface. "I've been thinking," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence. Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. When Emma announced she had been thinking, it usually preceded some ambitious plan or unconventional request. "About what? About the future. About what I want to do with my life." Victoria leaned forward, interested. "And what did you decide?" Emma took a deep breath. "I want to work with the Callahan Fund, after college, I mean. I want to help run it, expand it, make it bigger than it's ever been. I want to spend my life doing what you two have done, helping people who need it, giving them chances they never thought they'd have." Marcus felt his eyes sting with fresh tears. He had hoped but never assumed that Emma would carry on this work. The choice had to be hers. "Are you sure it's not glamorous work? It doesn't pay as well as what you could do with your skills. It's..." "Dad," Emma cut him off with a look that was pure Victoria. "I've watched you and Mom pour everything into this. I've seen what it does for people, how it changes their lives. Do you really think I want to spend my life chasing money when I could be doing something that matters?" Victoria reached across and took Emma's hand. "You can do both, you know. This work doesn't mean sacrificing your own dreams." "I know, but this is my dream." Emma's voice was firm, certain. "It has been ever since I understood what you were building. I just wasn't sure how to tell you." Marcus stood cross to his daughter and wrapped her in a hug that said everything words could not. "Your mother would be so proud of you." His voice was rough with emotion. "She used to talk about the kind of person she hoped you'd become. Kind, smart, passionate about helping others. She would look at you now and know that every sacrifice was worth it." Emma held on tight. "I miss her, Dad, even though I have Mom." She glanced at Victoria, who smiled through her own tears. "I still miss her sometimes." "Me too, sweetheart. Every day." They held each other as the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them. A family built from fragments, from loss and love and second chances. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. And in the end, Marcus thought that was all that mattered. Not the money or the fame or the buildings bearing his name. Not the press coverage or the social media followers or the endless speculation about how a mechanic from Portland had married one of the wealthiest women in the Pacific Northwest. What mattered was this: Emma's arms around his neck, Victoria's hand in his. The home they had built together, brick by brick and day by day from the ruins of their separate pasts. What mattered was love, stubborn, irrational, impossibly resilient love. "Okay," Emma said, finally pulling back with a watery laugh. "Enough emotional stuff. Can we watch a movie? Something funny? I'm tired of crying." Victoria wiped her eyes. I think we've earned a comedy. They went inside, piled onto the couch, and spent the next 2 hours laughing at something silly and familiar. Marcus sat between his wife and his daughter, arms around both of them, feeling the warmth of their bodies and the steady rhythm of their breathing. Outside, the night continued its quiet revolution. Stars rose and fell. The moon traced its ancient path across the sky. Somewhere in the city, people were struggling, suffering, hoping for a chance that might never come. But tomorrow, the Callahan Fund would open its doors again. Tomorrow, the Callahan Vocational School would welcome a new class of students. Tomorrow, the work of building a better world would continue. Marcus Callahan, who had once been just a mechanic with calloused hands and an empty bank account, would be part of that work. Not as a hero, not as a savior, but as a man who had learned that the greatest gift he could give was simply to show up day after day, choice after choice, and do his best to leave the world a little better than he found it. That was his legacy, not the buildings or the programs or the headlines, just the simple, stubborn, everyday practice of being kind. And in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.